All right, welcome to the ShadowTech Alchemy biweekly broadcast. I am Colin Davis.
And I am Melissa Mari.
And today's talk, this is October 1st, 2022, and today's talk is called Living Deeply in a Shallow World. And so we send out an email every 2 weeks to give people a heads up as to what these talks are going to be about. And I figured that first one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check, make sure all of our audio is working, and it is. And so how about to start off, I just read through the email to kind of introduce the subject. In Ken Wilber's book, Sex, Ecology, and Spirituality, he details the progression of Western civilization into modernity, which increasingly became what he calls flatland. The West became highly expansionist and concerned with things and less concerned with states of being. Life became shallower but much wider. More diversity of options, less depth of experience. The spiritual dimension increasingly fell away from life. So where does this leave us today? This super fast and distracting but flat and meaningless culture will never become deep and meaningful on its own. The only solution is individuals unplugging from the matrix, so to speak, and dedicating themselves to depth. This means less focus on what shallow people think or want, less focus on shallow activities like social media, and more focus on perfecting one's own life art, which is a term we use a lot. And this challenge will be the subject of this week's Zoom call.
Yeah, can I?
Yeah, you can go ahead and start off
so
here.
So the reason why we decided on this subject was, usually we start having conversations and these certain focus of attention, and from my experience I've been detoxing from social media lately, and as I've been detoxing, I'm recognizing how you are going through a natural like if you were going to do a cleanse on yourself in your physical body, you're going to have to go through a certain detoxification of your psychic, social experience, and have effects in your body, mind, and spirit. And this is a perfect opportunity to start to go into the internal state and start doing shadow work. Right. Start accessing these places that we've been displacing, right, through our addictions to social media, whether we know it or not. The what we call creepy crawlers, or the ones that have set up the system, and there's a lot of science out now that tells you that this is messing with our psyche. It's messing with the chemicals in our brain and our body. And so I'm going to let Colin go into the talk.
But so what you're saying though is that when you're detoxing from, let's say, social media, just as sort of the primary example, you're detoxing, when you're turning it off, when you're spending less time with it, you're finding that you were using it to distract yourself. And what now shows up in your experience when you're not distracting yourself with that, do you start going and distracting yourself with something else?
That was,
or do you allow yourself to start to perceive the inner functions that you were wanting to distract away from?
Yeah.
anytime you're
Yeah.
quitting anything, anytime you're quitting any addiction, anytime you're starting to break apart your behavior, you're going to start to be able to get access to you're going to be able to get access to whatever dynamics are going on in your psyche, and some of those are self-destructive. And so this is what basically we're always talking about shadow work, because it's kind of the first layer of what you need to get through to develop yourself psychospiritually. And the first layer is all of the cruddy stuff and all of the, maybe it's maybe it's narcissism, right? Maybe you're getting your narcissistic needs fulfilled through social media, or maybe you're getting your loneliness is being you think you're getting some social interaction, and that's helping you with your loneliness. Or maybe when you turn it off, maybe you start to find that there was all kinds of self-deprecating thoughts that start to show up, and maybe you have self-esteem issues, and those kinds of things start to show up. Maybe it's in the mind function, maybe it's in the emotional body, wherever it is. Maybe you see how you might want to go do something else to distract. You might want to go, watch TV, or you might want to drink or use marijuana or something else. And you get the opportunity whenever you stop some kind of habitual behavior, you get the opportunity to see what arises in that space. And then if you will start to catalog or start to take an accounting of what's in that space, then you can say, okay, look, this is what's showing up in that space where I was distracting myself, and now I can target those things, and I can start working on those things and start assimilating those things into consciousness. Allow those things to come in and first analyze them, and then feel them, and start to process the emotions that are behind those states that you were distracting away from. So that's kind of the one of the first things to say about the whole thing of social media. And
But I thought that the reason why this fit was because you
living deeply in a shallow world.
right, because our whole world, the matrix, there's different holons of matrices. Obviously, there's just the matrix of reality,
Yeah.
of
The external world.
the external world, but there's a matrix that's been created with the internet and social media, which is as strong or possibly even stronger than this other matrix that's going on, because it gives us an illusion of different aspects of our biological and psychic nature that we want and we need, right?
Yeah. So social media, which really, I mean, spending time on the internet or social media is something that comes for people who are comfortable, right? So people who don't have to be out there chopping wood, right? Or in other ways, maintaining their staying alive. So, but the subject of social media and addiction to social media, and I think we do want to talk a little bit more about this, and we had a talk earlier where we went into this even more deeply than what we've just said, and maybe how and some alternatives and things to think about. But to kind of go a little bit more into the actual topic as it was named, living deeply in a shallow world, and I read you that little piece about Ken Wilber and what he was saying philosophically in that book, and talking about the movement of our civilization into modern times, into modernity, and how that the emphasis went more into things and materialism and creating stuff and options and diversity and all of this creative external movement, which is fantastic in its own, and there's nothing objectively wrong about that, but that it came at a cost because and then with this movement into modernity and into rational thinking, the mythological sphere, the religious sphere, fell away more and more. And so when the rational mind said, "Hey, wait a minute, these religious myths and religious doctrine don't seem to stack up when we apply the rational thinking to them." What we did by throwing that away and just saying we don't need that anymore is we threw out, this Ken Wilber says, we threw out the baby with the bathwater. And so then we threw out the entire social structure that gave us access to our spirituality, gave us access to the mystery, so to speak, and gave us practices, gave us rituals, gave us ways of thinking about the mystery and our place in the mystery that still have not been answered by rationality. And so rationality has come in, it's discarded the old structure that connected us deeply to our spiritual nature, but then it didn't give us anything in return. And then we can't go back to the old way. Once you've been fully brought into rational thinking, it's very difficult to start to go back and to really be embedded into the mythological structure. It's very hard to fully do that. People try to go back to church and they try to do that, but they never really can actually live and think and feel that way. So we're sort of stuck in this purgatory, and the whole civilization is in this flatland. And so this is where you have what's called the meaning crisis. And so the antidote to this, the antidote to this flatland and to the meaning crisis is to basically pull back our shallow breadth. And social media and all of this is helping us to, extend our own thoughts and access other people's thoughts from far away. And we have this very, very open international communication system, and it's very wide and broad, but it's also very shallow because our personal relationships, we don't know our neighbors anymore, we're not going to church anymore, and increasingly work is happening online and through your laptop and all this kind of stuff. And so the antidote is to basically, it is not necessarily to go back to everything that you consider traditional, everything that you consider to be the old way and all of that. It is to basically start to take back your energy and your focus and your attention from shallow, broad activities and bring them back to your life art, your particular activities and progress
and relationships
and community activities and everything that give you joy and meaning and purpose in life. And it doesn't matter how you identify or what your life's purpose is, whether you're this kind of an artist or this kind of a business person or entrepreneur, or whether you're a librarian
or a mother
or a stay-at-home mom or stay-at-home dad or whatever it is that you are and that you're really focused on, or you're a farmer or whatever. You get back to farming, you get back to being an artist, you get back to being a full mother, a full father, a full community member, and an entrepreneur who is increasingly becoming a better entrepreneur, and you focus back on your life art. Now, the last thing I'll just say before maybe you can come in again is the thing about social media, and as a phone book, as a way of accessing people around the world, or as a storefront. Social media is cool. It's great, actually. And so it's almost like everyone has their own little storefront, and just like a little store, a bookstore, a record store, a hardware store, or whatever, the store owner puts in the front window whatever's for sale that week, or whatever new records came in, or whatever it is. It's one thing to say, here's a little snapshot of my life. Here's pictures of me with my family going to the zoo, or here's my latest art piece that I've created, or here's something that represents another stage in me opening my business. We just got the wooden sign that hangs out front completed, and here's a picture of it. And it's one thing to use social media as a way to share with whoever's out there, whoever follows you, little milestones in your life that it's like your storefront. It's another thing to be spending hours a day going back and forth in conversations, scrolling through all kinds of stuff and chit-chatting. It's almost like, and I use this example, I said, well, what if you were in the old world before we had this? And what if you were at the office and you went on a lunch break and you had to go down to the hardware store or whatever it is? And then every 10 feet, you stopped and had a little chit chat with somebody else on the street. And then you went over here, and then you'd never make it to the store. You'd be late coming back to work, or, it wouldn't work. You can't spend this much time just chit chatting with people that you don't really know. And now this thing about, sorry, I had to, one more thing. A way that we've sort of figured to basically stay connected with people who follow you, people who like whatever it is that you create, your little online community, or if you're selling something, you have a service or whatever it is, the way to connect with people and to do it in a much deeper way that is much closer to old world reality is the way we're doing it right now on Zoom, where you basically set up a way, whether it's through Facebook or it's through something live or that live or Zoom or whatever, and you invite people in, and you don't do it too frequently to burn people out. And it's kind of like having a party. It's like, hey, I'm having a party on Friday night or whatever. Anybody wants to come over, come over. And so you have a Zoom meeting or however it's done, and you invite people to come into the Zoom meeting and meet face to face and have conversations, and it's a much more human thing. And if you do it regularly, then you have an opportunity for people to actually get to know each other, and that is so much more fulfilling, and it is so much more productive than just scrolling. And I've noticed that I can get all kinds of people following me on Facebook that like my posts or whatever it is, but then I invite them into the Zoom call and they don't want to come in. So this is now where we're damaged. This is now where we're actually so used to the superficial level of friendship that we're afraid to actually meet. This isn't even face to face, but we're afraid to meet at that level. So this is getting really pathological now. This way of using the internet with Zoom or whatever, or just as a storefront to keep people up to date, is fine, and it's not unhealthy, I don't think. But using it to scroll and using it for narcissistic fuel, this is highly destructive. And really anybody that's, I can't tell people what to do, but if you're thinking that you're part of your task in life is to develop yourself, to mature yourself, to actually raise your consciousness, develop yourself, well, then you can't possibly be all over this social media doing this, and you know, it can't possibly work.
Yeah, something came up when you were talking about the ego mind and civilization, and through this expansive Western civilization and then the online, is that our ego, our mind, hold on, has developed now an extra, it's much stronger than it's ever been. So now we're so much in our heads into this hole on up here that we're more disconnected than we ever have been
yes.
from each other and ourselves and nature herself, you know. So this is this out of control ego mind. If we don't have enough separation with our ego mind and have practices and get in nature and get away from the computer and get interacting with our relationships
And working with your hands, whether you're a man or a woman, working with your hands,
cooking or sewing or anything that gets you back in touch with a somatic reality, touching, you know, I
playing with kids,
you know, I like to hug trees. I've been hugging trees my whole life. I was very
doing yoga outside. Right.
Taking walks,
hikes, bicycling.
And then you can notice when you're doing these activities what your mind is doing more. How is your mind spinning? Is there negative self-talk in there? Are bad feelings starting to come up?
When get them up.
Yeah, so this is all the stuff that starts to come up when we are disconnecting from this new mind, ego mind strength. And if we don't deal with this, then it takes us over, and you see all
it's killing our civilization.
It either becomes physical disease, emotional, psychic disease, or actual destruction, as what is going on in the outer world right now, where there's no anti-war movement right now. And you know, this is the extreme version of the shadow coming so far that
there's so much shadow repression that it's just pouring out right now into the collective in every way.
I mean, this mind, ego mind, out of control becomes Promethean. It becomes Luciferian. It takes you over. It makes you think that you are in control, but you're not in control. And so when you start to detox and you start to feel, I'm not in control anymore. Then what do you have, right? You have what you are right here, right now.
Once you unplug and you stop distracting, and you get back to, and you stop projecting and stop scheming, projecting, fantasizing, all of this ego activity.
You also get in touch, if you start to get in touch with your own shadow nature, from other talks that we've had about projecting the evil out into the world, you start to find out the evil in your own self and how you're contributing to the
Yes.
overall collective,
Yes.
and you start to pull that back,
Right.
then you're going to start, you cannot do evil things out in the world if you're dealing with your own internal
If
evil.
if you're willing,
If
if
you're
you're willing
willing
to see your internal evil and watch it manifest and watch yourself project and watch yourself scheme and watch yourself deny and repress. If you're willing to do that, well, then now you have all this work that you have to do, and you have to put a pause on all the distracting stuff, and you have to get back here. That's on the shadow side of things. But also,
Right.
when you start to pull back and you get out of the scheming and projecting, then one of the things you realize is that one of the reasons why you were scheming and projecting was because like you said, it was Promethean, and it gave you the illusion that you were greater, more important, more potent than you actually were. And what you get back to is you get back to this intense humility that if it goes too far, it will actually become nihilism and suicidal. But it's that I am just a speck of dust. I am just a little speck of dust. But the light side to that is, so first you have to go into and deal with, I am just a speck of dust. You're not a worthless speck of dust, though. You're not a worthless speck of dust, but you are a speck of dust. And here's where you get into the highest spiritual understanding that of the imago Dei, of the image of the God image within, how that every speck of dust has a holographic image of the entire system within it, and that you are an integral part of the entire system, and that you have a specific, although maybe convoluted, it seems, purpose in life, a specific purpose in life that should be found, that should be curated, and should be perfected. And so you are just this tiny little speck of dust, but this tiny little speck of dust can be turned into a tiny little jewel of not complete perfection, but relative perfection.
Or a crystal.
A crystal.
If you look in a wall, a crystal.
A little facet of that you can polish that little facet. And so there is, in this revelation, there is the realization of how small and insignificant you are, and that starts to pull away from your narcissism and your grandiosity. But then there is also the realization that you are here for a reason, for a purpose, and that the entire universe is depending on you. And holding those two, one in each hand, and balancing those, that's a job of
Well, that is the integration, individuation path.
Yes, there you go.
It's you're becoming aware that you have this ego mind, and then you realize that that ego mind is just the driver in your life, but it is not who you are. And
Right.
then you have to unwind that and
Right.
start to continue to surrender and to let go of that. It's a grandiosity, it's a narcissism.
Yep.
It's like or you could say I'm in control. No.
It's
It's like this is what our mind is trying to get us to think that we are in control. But when you start to surrender, you realize that, and you start to die to a certain kind of
Need to control.
need to control an idea. You start to get more in touch with these natural cycles of life and death.
From the Jungian point of view, is that that all the thoughts and the schemes and the plans and the projections and the fantasies and all of that, those are there to basically, yes, to offer you. It's not a complete illusion of control. It is an attempt to control your personal environment, and to a degree it works.
It's biological.
And to a degree it works. And the
Yeah.
reason why humans are so advanced in certain ways is because we have this ego mind that can do all of this processing. And we can control our environment, and we can build these houses and do all of that. But what ends up happening is that we also use this scheming as a way to attempt to mitigate the deep existential fear of death. And that when you start to let go of the planning and the scheming and the hope and the thinking that you're in control, or that you need to be in control, what starts to flood in, besides all of the stuff you've been avoiding superficially, but this sort of deep fear of death and fear of everything that you've done being swept away, or falling into nihilism and all of that. And so, but this has to be done. You have to go through this. You have to, and when we're talking about the social media and the distraction and all of that, and I'm suggesting, stop getting on there and doing all this scrolling, and start doing more, worthwhile stuff like Zoom calls and stuff like that. What am I suggesting that we go back to how we were in the 1970s or 80s, when
It'll
we
never
were
be that
still
way.
just completely repressed, distracted people, just in another way? No, because this entire civilization is allergic to looking at the dynamics of its inner state. We are what was it that Robert Moore said about Americans? He said that we are manically afraid of our own shadows. Manically afraid. Like hysterically afraid
but what's
of our own
funny
garbage.
is that the shadow now has completely taken over.
Right.
Completely
It's
taken
just-
over. It's
now everybody's
it-
identifying with these shadow
it's
characteristics.
Just vomiting
Right,
out
it's just
there.
vomiting out, and there's just all these unconscious people, and we're finding out how unconscious most people are, and how psychospiritually immature most people are,
And how their shadow complexes totally can take over their entire
collectively
ego
we're about
and-
age 12 or something, at least in America, and so okay.
Yeah.
There's the problem. There's a potential solution. The solution is always get back into your own life art, get back into relationships which are as deep as you can get them. And if you can't find them around you, maybe you're not looking, or maybe you can do the next best thing, and that's like do these kinds of, have your own Zoom calls. You don't have to join ours. Have your own Zoom calls and invite people in there and form community, and as best you can. If you can meet these people in real life, do it, and start, and then as we already had a world where most people who knew each other in the real world still only knew each other superficially. And now you don't even really need to get to know people that much in the real world. And what really needs to happen is people need to, maybe this sort of is the final point on all this, is that to get through the meaning crisis, besides just focusing on our own life art, and really perfecting our own life art is to start to tolerate other people's, not only our own shadow garbage, but be able to tolerate other people's shadow garbage, and be able to tolerate very imperfect relationships, and be able to confront other people and be confronted by other people on our shadow stuff. Because this is what's keeping relationships shallow, is that people are afraid, is that if I develop a deeper relationship with this person or that person, well, they might hurt me, I might hurt them, I might find out something nasty about them, they might find out something nasty about me. I don't know if I'm able to really deal with that part of them, or I'm afraid they may not be able to deal with that part of me. What will happen if they find this out about me? What will happen if they found out that I'm this kind of an addict, or that I'm having these breakdowns and crying for an hour, or that I have this or that other problem, and what if they find out that I'm really imperfect and fucked up? And then what about them? You know, and then what will we do when we find out that we're all fucked up? How will we interact then? What will we then do? And will we run away from each other? And most people will run away from each other when it gets hard like that. And so this is where it's in order to break through the shallowness, break through the cultural malaise, and break through all of this, you know, this surface level ice, is that we have to develop, first through tolerating our own shadow stuff, the ability to be able to tolerate other people's garbage, and the ability to be able to have conflicts with other people that resolve themselves mutually. You can't, remember, you can't avoid conflict in life. You will never avoid conflict in life. You will always be fighting. You will always be suffering. You will always be combating somebody internally, externally. You will always be struggling in some way, and then you will have these moments of smooth sailing, and then you will run into another storm. And all you can do is not, first of all, not try to create conflicts unconsciously, because you're working on your own complexes, you're working on your own garbage, and so you're trying to at least not dump garbage into the world. But if you do run into conflict, which you will, you want to make sure that when you get out of that, when you smooth that over with that other person, that both of you have the capacity and the intention to comb through everything that went on there and figure out how that happened.
And take responsibility for your part.
Take responsibility for your part. In fact, take responsibility for the whole thing.
Right.
And how that it was all part of your path, and then be able to learn from that, and perhaps not even be able to stop the next conflict, but be able to each time raise your consciousness a little bit more, and to be able to see a little bit more from a higher and higher perspective. You need conflict to wake up.
Yes.
And so this is why we constantly call this path a warrior path.
Right.
This is a psycho-spiritual warrior path. You have to be able to go into conflict, and if people are hiding stuff, you have to be able to go, okay, this person has been hiding this stuff for a long time, and let me think to myself how I'm going to approach them in the nicest, most lubricated way possible, but I am going to now address this subject with them, and I'm going to put the whole thing on the table, and we're going to watch what happens.
Yeah, now we have been getting some chats from Mr. Mitchell on there. I looked on Facebook. I'm
done for now.
Yeah.
That's good.
I
so
think
we can all join in now and talk.
There's nobody on Facebook right now, but you're not going to hear on Facebook half of the conversation that's going on right now.
Yep.
So we recommend getting on Zoom.
Right.
So just go to shadowtechalchemy.com and
Right.
just get
Go.
on the Zoom call.
Let's ask
He put some chats.
Yeah,
in
okay.
there.
Let's ask Mr. Mitchell to unmute himself and comment because
He
because
commented already.
but he's new. If he wants to talk to us, go ahead and we'll have a chat.
Hi, Colin and Alyssa and everyone. I actually how I been following you guys for quite a long time. I think it was probably when Colin came out with the book Shadow Tech Alchemy.
Oh yeah, right.
I met you through Facebook. Like, I don't know, it was probably like 5 years ago or something like that.
Oh, okay. What's your first name?
I was going by my middle name, Norman, at the time.
Okay. Norman.
Yeah, I met you through like a Jordan Peterson interaction that we had, and then I haven't been on Facebook for years though. I deleted it probably a couple years ago when it started to get really crazy at the around the time of COVID propaganda and stuff. But yeah, I've always I really definitely benefited from some of the stuff you guys shared over the years and in that book, and I just kind of been passively receiving your emails. I haven't really followed that closely the past few years, but this one actually struck a chord with me because I did read SES, Wilber's.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah, a few years ago, and I actually was really pretty in depth, getting a lot of good things from Wilber's work for a number of years, and so like, I mean, a lot of the tools that he uses and kind of opened up my way of thinking to be a lot more inclusive of all these different elements.
Yeah.
Including the shadow work, which I had, learned a lot from him about that before I had read your book. And then I did look to some extent at Jung's work, including the Red Book. And yeah, what you've said today, I really resonates with me. And I actually, my wife passed away in 2020, right before the onset of the COVID stuff. Actually, a lot of the stuff that you guys talk about really like makes sense to me on a very deep level, like in my personal life experience. I feel like you guys are some of the most like experienced and savvy when it comes to the reality of how this stuff works, like how it how when you change the way that you act, it then connects you with these levels of reality that can be shocking and surprising, but you can feel that you're kind of either moving towards more deeper authentic relationship with reality, or that's confirmed by somatic and other kinds of shocking experiences. So for me, like, it led on a trajectory through a bunch of Gurdjieff work and work with Maurice Nicole's commentaries for a number of years. He did these five volumes.
He's a Gurdjieffian. Okay.
Yeah, Maurice Nicole. He actually studied with Jung first, and then with Ouspensky, and then with Gurdjieff in person. And then he was given approval by Uspensky and Gurdjieff to actually start teaching directly.
Uh-huh.
That was at the time of World War II in England. He kind of connected me more with my conscience, that it kind of relates to a lot of this kind of shadow work that, as you were saying earlier, that sort of once you open up a bit to it and to being willing to work with your shadow elements, and also finding people who you can work with on these things, that when you can become a little bit more transparent, then you can kind of work through some of this stuff and get to get closer to a place where you're, I guess, in Jungian terms, you're individuating more and becoming a more integral, like accounting for more of who and what you are and things like that, and your relationship with the world.
Yes, that's it. The more willing you are to become conscious of any material, external or internal, that is conflicting, that is uncomfortable, or that is maybe, or that invokes fear, or I mean, we could also not, just always label everything that needs to be worked on as uncomfortable, but could say more mysterious, like, let's say in terms of dream work and all of that, or in terms of synchronicities, and what do these mean, these things that are showing up, and individuating and becoming conscious of unconscious material, and unconscious interrelational dynamics is not necessarily always uncomfortable and shadowy and all of that, but it seems that the training that is, it's basically, it's kind of, well, the alchemical formulation that kind of takes you from negrito to albedo to rubedo is kind of the archetype of it, in that if the negrito is the shadow and the darker and most uncomfortable stuff, and is about the fire of purification and calcination and breaking down and all of that, that's the most radical and uncomfortable stuff. And if you can't make it through that, you can't keep going. You need that it's a boot camp. You need that intense, difficult boot camp training of being able to confront the most ego conflicting material in the psyche, to be able to develop the skill set to be able to just go ahead and continuing to individuate and to develop over the course of life. And so this is why the shadow work is so important, and why focusing on the shadow is so important, and why we're constantly saying, you're gonna have to deal with conflict. It's kind of like when you're a Marine and you go to boot camp, and what is the drill sergeant telling you about how brutal this way of life is and how hard it's gonna be on you, because they need to get that through your skull, that this you got to be able to get that. And so that's the same thing here, and why we just constantly focus on the difficult stuff and constantly ask people to look at the difficult stuff first, because I think that's the training that you need.
Yeah, I can.
And Gurdjieff was saying the same thing with making people physically work, right?
And do mindfulness.
And he was always, saying the same thing.
Yeah,
basically.
he had the whip out.
Yeah.
He played with people on
Yeah, he's
purpose.
kind of a trickster.
But I think this is what scares a lot of people with what we're doing and what we talk about, because we're not pussyfooting around, right?
Right.
We
Right.
take this extremely seriously personally. Every day is
Right.
is an opportunity. Every minute is an
Yeah.
opportunity to grow and to learn.
You're on the mat. You're on the dojo or
Yeah.
the whatever, the karate mat every day.
Yeah, and so yes, it's challenging, but I wouldn't change anything because
Yeah.
I feel very strongly that this evolutionary path that humanity is on will eventually evolve naturally to this another understanding, like maybe, well, Ken Wilber's system. This
Oh,
would
second tier.
in
This is
second
this is
tier.
the way
Yeah.
to second tier is
Right.
through all this shadow garbage.
Right. This is what a lot of people are missing
Including
integral
the
and
it's interesting how I with back to Wilbur, I look at Wilbur, and even though I think his illness is a symptom of his own repressed shadow garbage, but at least if you go looking in his material, you will find that he does deeply understand this aspect. He does understand this. There's one document, it's not a book, but it's called Integral Spirituality. And it was a document that he prepared for a presentation in 2007, I think. And it might have shown up in other places too, but his whole segment in there on the shadow is extremely good. And it's kind of like how Jung said that he wouldn't want to be a Jungian. I feel like there's
Right.
there's a whole community around Wilbur that isn't really getting Wilbur, right?
Absolutely, you're right. Yeah, for sure.
And there's this whole kind of and he kind of allowed it to happen in a way by allowing himself to be a guru and
Right.
or allowing this whole community. And there was a whole grandiosity phase where he was starting these different organizations and all of this, and thinking that maybe Integral could plug into academia, and maybe that's not grandiose, maybe that's just a worthwhile project, but then it couldn't, because academia was too shallow itself to be able to plug in. But this whole community formed around, and then they became so allergic to their own shadow stuff that they basically just stopped at the green level, right, at the postmodern green level, and hardly anyone from the Jungian community, there are some, but I would say hardly anyone from the Jungian community is really solidly balanced at second tier, right there. And most, I'd say 99% of the community is still solidly in green. And so I can't recommend the Wilberian community that much, but I can recommend Ken Wilber's work highly, for sure.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. Yeah.
Yeah. Feel the same way?
Yes. Well, I mean, yeah, definitely. Wilbur himself has done a lot of very high integral work. And I mean, I think everyone and everyone's work is like you take the good and you leave the bad, like
Yes.
you leave what's, yeah.
Yes.
So I don't believe in sort of putting any particular individual on a pedestal, but
Right.
but definitely he has a lot of his work has been really helpful. It was kind of like I went through a lot of it a number of years ago. The last book that I've read of his, I don't know, haven't been following what he's up to in the last couple of years, but I read his book, The Future of Religion, which also made some interesting points at the time. I did value it. But I did notice that the sort of, like you said, like Jung said about, I would not
Yeah.
want to be a Jungian. Like, I mean, it was like the kind of people that were forming around were kind of not at the same level as what Wilber was working with, really. And yeah, like maybe around a greenish, kind of greenish orange or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It-
There. Yeah.
but um, what was I gonna? So yeah, I somehow, anyways, I mean, my story is very long and complex, but what I can say is that I eventually, I gradually worked my way into sort of esoteric Christianity, which is coming out of Orthodox Eastern Christianity.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've found a lot of really good help and developments through that. And I don't really want to talk a lot about it, but I just say that it is a kind of invisible, kind of very foreign form of Christianity that actually claims to, and I think for very good reasons, to be the original church that was unchanged really since the time of Christ, and before that was through Judaism. It's very interesting, and they're not very outspoken, and they don't do a lot of outreach, but they're sort of slowly growing in the shadows in
I've noticed
the
that.
United
Yeah.
States.
Yeah.
And I find that just humbly sort of approaching and just witnessing and learning, seeing different things that are available to us for free through the Eastern Orthodox massive body of works and their living tradition has been really, really helpful and interesting. And I actually ended up formally converting, getting
Oh, wow.
baptized,
Oh, okay.
chrismated,
Wow.
and getting involved like in the holy mysteries. They call the mysteries. They've got, so it's very different, and it's very much aligned with what Gurdjieff was doing and what with a lot of the concepts that you guys are working with and shadow work and things like that. And
Now,
in a way,
is this the Greek Orthodox Church you're talking about?
I actually was baptized in a Greek Orthodox parish. But the Orthodox Church as a whole,
As a whole.
including the Russian Orthodox, the Greek Orthodox, Antiochian Orthodox, and sort of in America, the OCA, the Orthodox Church in America.
Oh, okay.
There's a few groups that call themselves Orthodox that are not actually in communion with the rest of Orthodoxy for various historical reasons. Like there's the non-Chalcedonians who didn't accept the council at Chalcedon. But by and large, sort of for example, the Greek Orthodox, the Russian Orthodox, and the Antiochian Orthodox, those are sort of the main ones that are most visible in the West, are all in communion with each other. Or they maintain a bit of their ethnic identity in order to maintain some of their language and stuff like that. But the basically things are the same. Like it's interchangeable whether you can go to one or the other, and there's just a few sort of cultural differences, but the dogmatic or doctrinally they're the same. So and they're in
We went to a presentation in Monterey, California at a Greek Orthodox church.
Well, it was like
It was a open presentation.
it was an open presentation, like they brought in the icons into a museum setting, and then they had a presentation.
Yeah, there was a lot of art that they had brought in.
And it was really incredible.
amazing deep art and stuff.
Really beautiful.
And yeah, and it was, it was at least the setup that we saw, which was, inside the church. A lot of art was in there, just nominally was in there, but then probably some extra stuff was brought in. And the whole thing about the focus on art, which is similar to what the Catholics are doing.
Iconography, yeah.
And when you're, and when you're coming from the view of Christianity through the Protestant lens, that's so devoid of art and aesthetics. I mean, the Protestant churches,
Yeah.
like the Baptist churches and stuff, are just the most bare bones kind of ordeals, and we felt very deeply about that presentation and about the whole thing, the thing the guy
There's a
gave and stuff was very
mystery
deep, and it was
within
very.
it.
I thought to myself, if I ever was going to convert, I would convert to Greek Orthodox. I thought that
That's
at the
what
time.
I did. Yeah.
Yeah,
After
that's
my
what you
wife
did.
passed away. Yeah.
Wow.
But
I'm
I
sorry
first
to hear
got
that
in.
about your wife.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. I first got into it through through sort of the Gurdjieff and esoteric Christianity connection, and then
Mm-hmm.
through doing some reading and then attending a few times at some Orthodox parishes, mainly Greek Orthodox. In Australia, it was interesting. That's where I was living, and there are actually many Greeks in Australia that I guess started immigrating there about 100 years ago or so. And so they actually have a lot of Greek Orthodox churches pretty much all over the place there. But so, yeah, I got into it for the esoteric and depth psychology aspects. They have something called the prayer of the heart. They use sometimes a black prayer rope, but this is part of the tradition, especially in the monasteries and things like that, Mount Athos and stuff. So, but yeah, so I've been actually reading a lot about the history too. Then, like, I'm still reading right now a book called Orthodoxy and Heterodoxy. But this particular book is very interesting in the depth that he's basically going in and exploring the history of how Christianity fragmented into all these different groups, and the history and what they practice and believe, and then comparing that with what Orthodoxy believes and practices. So, and it's quite interesting. And then also, I'm just getting into the part where he then also has a few chapters on other non-Christian religions and exploring the same thing, like what they believe, what they practice, and whether that differs or is the same as
that's cool.
Orthodoxy.
I wrote that down. I might look at that. That sounds good. So it's a comparison of a lot of the fundamentals of the Orthodox Church with the rest of Christianity and other religions.
Yes.
Yeah, that sounds good. That sounds important. Yeah. Who's the author?
Let me just check. I'm listening to it on Audible, and it's read by the author. It's called Orthodoxy and Heterodoxy by Andrew Stephen Damick.
D-A-M-A-K?
D-A-M-I-C-K.
Okay. Well, thanks, Norman. Is that how we'll address you?
Pano or Panayoti.
Pano?
Yeah, that's from my Greek name from
Pano.
that I got
Pano
when I got
good.
baptized. When I got baptized in the Greek Orthodox Church, I got the name Panayotis, which is an epithet of the Mother of God. It means the All Holy, and that's one of her epithets because it's considered in Orthodoxy that she gave birth to God.
Right.
anyway, it's just
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
it's a male
Yeah.
name. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I really like that name. So I'm trying to use that instead of my original two names, Paul Norman. Yeah.
Bono.
Oh, I like the pet name Pano.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, so in Greek, the male names typically have an S at the end, like Panayotis or Panos. And then
Panos.
when you address somebody, you drop the S. So that's why I say
Ah,
Oh,
I
Pano.
see.
Yeah.
I see. Oh, okay.
That's great. I've studied the history of Russia. I've always had some synchronistic connection to Russia. I don't have to go into the whole story about that,
That's fascinating. Yeah.
but
She has ancestry from Romania, Moldavia.
well, Moldavia,
Wow.
yeah, Moldova. That's where my grandparents came from. But
I had a grandmother from Russia too.
Oh, okay.
oh yeah,
Except she wasn't really connected to the culture there that much, but
Right.
it was just a weird connection that yeah, but they were Germans in Russia for some reason. But anyway, yeah, it's just,
but I noticed through studying some Russian history is that the whole spread of the Russian Orthodox Church, how they separated from the Greek Orthodox, how they had these monks that were incredibly spiritual people who would go into the woods and go into the wilderness and just face themselves, basically. They would face
yeah,
the elements, and then other people would start to go around some of these higher spiritual monks and start these monasteries. But
yeah,
there's something about the icons, the buildings, the art, which has a sense. It has a deep, just exactly what we've been talking
Yep.
about.
Yeah.
Depth,
Yep.
right?
exactly.
Depth. It's like this mysterious depth that you can just feel.
And the
you know?
cool thing about orthodoxy is that it's an actual tradition
Yep.
that's coherent, that whereas you can find some of this in these pre-Christian, let's say Gnostic or Neoplatonic type sects, but those never
Yep.
really stayed afloat. And so
Right.
if you find yourself allergic to Christianity because you were somehow damaged by it in childhood, and
Right.
that you want to go back to something that is original, and you steer around all of Christianity and you go back to some esoteric Gnostic or some other kind of sect or something, and then you try to
And I went through that.
imbibe that. Oh, you went through that. I see. Yeah. So and then you find that there's something there at the heart of it for sure, but that there isn't an agreed upon structure that's been worked with and worked on through generations to kind of carve it out into something that fits with the psyche. It's kind of like going back to people's experiments and then pulling out the experiments and saying, well, maybe I'll continue on with this person's work. It's you can do that if you can just, if you're just really into. I guess there's something about it's that it depends on where you're at, because somebody like me, I will never fully allow any other person or group or doctrine to dictate to me the meaning of aspects of my own interior life or aspects of the world. And I just won't allow that. I'm just too much of an individualist to do that. And I'm too willing to work it out for myself. I'm too much of a tinkerer, of an experimenter, of an alchemist. I'm just too much of an alchemist to do that, to basically just plug into any doctrine and say, thanks, I'm going to run that operating system on my computer, and I don't need anything else now. But
I get that.
you know what I'm saying? But but at the same time, there's something. It's using the computer analogy. What if you're the kind of person that doesn't like Windows and doesn't like the Mac operating system, and you're enough of a programmer to where you can run some kind of open source system like Linux or something, and you can start plugging in your own applications and coding your own apps. Okay, that's fine, you can do that, but you're still using a pre-made coding system that somebody else or that a whole community had created over many years' time. You're still basing your own little creation on something. And so that's where, if you're a Jungian, or you're kind of coming from where we're at, you're still using the Western operating system. You're still using the Christian operating system, whether you like it or not. It's built into your language. And
Right.
And so
Exactly.
And so there's
Yeah.
and you're
I
still
explored the East a lot too before, and I actually majored in East Asian studies and spent about 10 years of my life in South China and East Asia. And so my background is quite varied. But
Where
it's
are
like,
you now? Where are you located now?
I'm
Where
now in
palm trees are.
in Washington State,
Oh, those aren't palm trees behind you.
Tacoma. These are
Tacoma.
Oh, those are redwoods? Oh, those are some kind of pines.
beautiful.
Beautiful. Yeah, nice.
Some kind of pines,
Yeah.
Around a lake. There's a lake back there, big lake.
Oh, looks nice.
I've been on the road since 2021 when I escaped the insane Sydney lockdown.
Oh, right.
And came to the United States. I've been on the road since then. I've been in the United States and Mexico since then.
Interesting.
I'm working my way.
What kind of vehicle do you have?
Where I'm from.
Oh, you're working your way back to Canada.
What kind of vehicle do you have?
I'm actually like I don't have a vehicle, and I'm actually like using mostly like Uber and airplanes and things like that. And occasionally I'll rent a car. But yeah, I'd be interested to maybe be able to stop by and visit you guys in person at some point if it works out, because
you can.
I'm gonna be in Arizona like from Halloween until the 5th of November. So I might be able to swing by like before or after that.
Okay.
If you guys are still in Austin.
Yeah, we'll be here. If you're swinging by, we can meet up for sure. Okay, cool. So that was great talking to you. And let's see if I know we also have Scott and Stephanie who are regularly on this call, and you probably would like what they have to say. If either of you guys, Scott or Stephanie, want to come in and comment, go for it. And if either of you has to go anywhere, you can sort of do it as you need to. You want to say something, Stephanie? Ladies first.
I wanted to give the wheel.
What's that? You wanted to what?
I wanted to let Scott speak first.
Oh, you want to let Scott speak first? Okay. What do you have to say, Scott?
I don't have a whole lot. I really resonated with your presentation and especially talking about being in harmony with your purpose. That's very important. And that is something, I arrived at myself, and, when I hear it put into words, I love it, because it shows that people who reach a certain stage do recognize that that's kind of like probably the most common spiritual goal or pursuit. Or I'm at a loss for words here.
Well, You mean what? You mean finding your life art and concentrating on that? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, that, and I learned in the last few years going into philosophy and, various places that it's not a new concept at all. It's Dharma, I think. And,
Oh, none of this is new.
yeah, but what I had arrived at was that in the balancing chakra of the heart, where you radiate and perceive the universe, in my opinion, that's where, there's sort of a simultaneous thing that happens when the heart chakra really opens and you become really centered. You are in your purpose. Either you're going to find your purpose pretty quickly, or you've arrived there because you were living in your purpose, right? So I'd see those as very intimately connected. So
Yes.
that's where my attention went, because when I do lots of inner work stuff with people, but I know that they are going to be happiest if they find their inner purpose. So I'm always thinking, how can I help them arrive at that? And
Yes.
interestingly enough, in the Dianetic Scientology model that I work with as my counseling basis, that getting the client, it's a client-centered therapy. So getting the client what they want, eventually they open up to being able to think, maybe I can do something big with my life, and maybe I can pursue a higher purpose. So I've seen that unfold in others as well as myself, so, and, when I look at, when you really, I was, while you were talking, I was intrigued with the Ken Wilber model, because I've read the book, but it's been so many years, so I had to really quickly refresh. And I looked at that, what you were talking, I wanted to know what you were talking about with second tier.
Oh, right.
And I related that to my work in terms of, if your purpose starts to, if your purpose becomes or can be defined as being on that second tier in some way, which I see a mutual purpose with you guys, which is why I so love getting together. And not that, none of us are perfect, and none of us have it all in terms of consciousness and things. But when you can really zoom out on all of the dynamics of life and realize that you're a small part, but somebody who could make a critical, helpful change to this whole, we're a fractal of something big, right? And we have immense power, and spiritual leaders have taught us this over a long time. Immense power as a little bitty fractal to actually radiate some pretty huge things with the work that we do. And I feel, I'm working really hard to integrate my purpose into my life, because you have your practical life that you have to do to
Right.
feed the
That's
body.
part
and
of
sleep
it.
and
That's
everything.
part of your purpose, though.
Yeah. And as you get older, it slows down a little bit, and you can't spend as much time and energy on the purpose, but the purpose can be pretty powerful, and it can, it leads me forward. And so I'm really happy to be working in purpose and to be connecting with others of like purpose, because that's where I think, that's where I think it's at. That's where the spiritual gold is, the alchemical gold.
Yeah, Scott, what if as you grow older and you, let's say you end up spending more and more time on the basics right?
Mhm.
And then you were saying, I would consider your purpose is kind of intertwined in everything.
Right.
But let's say your alchemical gold, your highest purpose, your alchemical gold, um, and if you, as you get older, if you have less time for 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 searching, and I mean a lot of time is spent searching for your purpose and questioning whether it's this, or experimenting in the world to see what resonates and all of that. And as you get older, and the sort of time wave collapses, then if you have been on this trajectory and been and been conscious that you're searching for this purpose and working out this purpose, then what you get to is you get to less time for the searching and more time for the actual, even no matter where you are in life, if you're tuned in to the gold, if you're tuned in to that jewel, then it doesn't matter how much time you have, you're always working on that jewel. And so
Oh, that's so true. So true. Yeah.
But if you're not, if your ego state is not tuned in to that jewel, and there's still all kinds of clouding around it,
Well,
and you're not sure what it is.
You could be tuned into the jewel, but there also could be complexes
Yeah.
that are.
If there's all kind of complexes that are pulling you
clouding.
away from that and distracting you from that, which is what they do, distracting you from polishing the mirror or carving on the jewel or whatever, perfecting the gold, then you're in a bad place, because you're getting older now, and there's still a lot of work to do on that gold. There's still a lot of purification that needs to happen, but you've been being distracted away from it with all of these other complexes. And so, which reminds me of your document, so if you can really tune into and identify that highest purpose, the earlier the better, then you can kind of let all this other stuff, if it works out, great. If it doesn't work out, no problem. You have that one thing going on, and you can always just keep honing in on that and working on that. And so,
Yeah, the more that you individuate, the more that you're constantly doing this uncovering of one's own complexes, shadow, your emotional processing, all of this every day, the jewel becomes unclouded, and the crystallized nature of the jewel will naturally become the substance, and then the external, even the complexes, will not keep you from
No.
polishing this.
kind of like us with this whole shadow thing, and I've had to kind of really go, what the hell is this whole obsession when this constant coming back to the shadow and talking about the shadow and studying it and thinking about it. And anybody that's into Jungian science will go, okay, well, that's part of the equation, but that's not the whole thing. Why are you so focused on that? And then I go, okay, and I just keep coming back to it, and I look at my life's trajectory and how I was, in different ways, through art or through other methods, always still looking at what was behind things, and and the darker
and
elements,
the yucky stuff,
and understand what is the purpose of evil, and how does it actually work in psychology, and how does it work in culture, and how does it work in integrated social systems. And I'm just constantly going back onto this, the dark side and all this. And it's like, at some point I had to say, okay, well, this is a huge part of my purpose. And so this is instead of questioning it all the time and stuff. Just embrace it and go, okay, this is your thing, man. And maybe there's another wave, maybe there's another aspect that hasn't come yet that's also your thing, but you got to at least take this thing seriously and stop denying what's been right in your face the whole time. This is your thing. Do your thing the best you can.
We all have little seeds in
Yeah, it's
whatever
it's
way.
one of my little
and
seeds, yeah.
It's just,
Yep.
but it is through doing this individuation work in every whole on body and mind and ego and spirit that you find the gold, you polish the gold,
Yep.
you're integrating it,
Yep.
and it is natural.
Yep.
It's a natural progression.
Yep.
And
Alchemy's just going on. It's just going
Yeah.
on, and you can either get involved in it or not.
right.
Yeah, I would say it starts aligning the other areas of your life that
Right.
were once, that thing of gold was in the mix somewhere, but it wasn't the center.
Right.
And once it becomes the center, and I was just flashing back on, I think back in January, I talked a little bit about taking out a shadow
Yep.
element that I was working on, and I
Yep.
had a big breakthrough with that.
Yes.
And one
Right.
of the things that occurred from the breakthrough was being able to see that jewel clearly most of the time again. And now I can see that what is my inner work, because I've gone through so much of the emotional processing. We've talked about that, and a lot of other types of processing as well. And it's done me really great and raised my consciousness and my interest in life and everything. But so now, I've wondered what I know I need to do more inner work, but how do I get to it? And now it just occurred to me talking to you today that those things which distract you from that jewel, from that purpose,
Yes.
are strings you can pull. It's like, well, why do I get my attention off? Why did I go off this trail over here?
Mhm.
And what's pulling me down there? And that's the kind of thing that I think I have been sort of unconsciously looking at in my inner work, but now it's suddenly become conscious. Those are the things that I need and want to clear up, because they do distract from the purpose, and the purpose is becoming stronger and stronger.
Right. Right. Yeah. And to be able to discern whether or not some interest is a true distraction or whether it's something that needs to be discovered and brought into life. And so
Yeah.
that's where you have to kind of let go of it, see what feelings come up, and sort of test it and pull on it and kind of see what is this thing and why am I attracted to this, and is this purely a distraction, or is it is there some element of this activity that's necessary, but then I'm using it as a distraction when I can still use this as maybe it's a necessary component, but I'm just
Yeah. And
yeah.
the last thing I wanted
go ahead.
thing I wanted to say on this was that I have to be honest with myself, that I'm not doing the presentations and the outreach and the Zoom calls and the things that I have postulated that I need to get to in order to deliver the fruits of my,
Okay.
work.
Right.
And you mentioned that too on your, in your talk.
Yes.
And, it's like you have to get your ducks in a row, as we say. And I have gotten a lot of ducks in a row, but I still, I still have to ask myself, what's holding me back from taking that final step? I mean, I did take a pretty big step recently and did a couple months ago, I did several calls and interviews with people, and it was just like clicking
Good.
together. And I've done one now and then since then, but
Right.
Launching my own podcast and fixing up my websites. Those are the things that make that it's these little steps at the end of that path to connect with others so that they can see, they can learn, they can
Yeah.
get some of the knowledge from that jewel that you have, that you've worked so hard to attain.
Well,
You
I
know,
could give
and
you some advice on
yeah.
that, Scott, and I understand you fully. It's and there's a stage fright part of it, and
Yeah.
there's a fear that if I put myself out in this way, maybe nobody will show up,
Yeah.
and or that I'll get bored, or that I don't have enough to say, or I'll end up having to repeat myself, or all that kind of stuff, or maybe my backup material is not put together enough. Maybe I don't have a book out or whatever it is and all that. And I can tell you that in order to mediate or to lessen my own anxiety, I do work hard to constantly make the website better, constantly, or to work hard to make sure that if I put something out like a book or any kind of a presentation, that it's as perfect as I can get it, because of my natural, of my, fear, because of fear of rejection. And so I'm going to be being perfectionistic in order to deal with that. But
Extremely conscientious and a control freak.
being a control freak, the good side of that is conscientiousness.
Right.
The other side of that is a control freak, and doing all that so that. And then I've also had to deal with, for example, we started a podcast before, and the second time we started it, we got to about the 20th one, and I'm like, okay, I'm run out of material, and then
I'm bored.
Then the idea that maybe I'll start interviewing people and start going on that path, and that's still open, and I'm still doing that. But I also realized how I'm just not really that. The only people I really want to interview are people who are already at my level, or who can contribute something and add something that a piece of the puzzle I don't already have yet, not just as a chit chat, or whatever. And a lot of people do interview programs and podcasts just for the narcissistic aspect of getting out and, look at me and my podcast. And so what the advice that I would give, which is kind of maybe been a tiny bit successful. I mean, our own reach is small, but I've kind of realized, and you've talked about this, is the simplification of the method and the simplification of the message. And so that if you can identify the audience and really hone it down to a very small audience that is just the core audience, and so the Scientology audience, if you could just hone it down to that audience, and then really just stake out the kind of legs of your structure of what it is that you've realized through being there, and all the work that you've done of what's missing and what you can add, and say these are the things that's missing and needs to be added, and then just do that over and over and over again work it out. And maybe you realize, well, that wasn't really the right thing, I'll pull something else in. But just work on that core little seed of what your addition to the tradition is, and just target that. Then it doesn't, even if you get 3 people on there or whatever, it doesn't matter, and it will grow from there. Then you can start expanding out from there. So you stay small and focused, and then that way you can just let go of all the grandiosity and fantasies and what ifs and all that kind of stuff, and say I'm open to it expanding, but I'm also just going to target right here this specific audience, and this is my specific message. And then it relieves a lot of burden. And you can put together that specific little message with 4 little legs on that table and say, this is what I'm going to be getting out there. And then as you do the podcast or the broadcast or the outreach, whatever it is, you just keep getting better and better at that thing until you know, you can just put it onto us into a single little deal and make a
It'll
little pamphlet for it.
probably, yeah, I was
It'll
gonna
turn it,
say it'll
right?
probably end up being a book.
It'll be a book, and even if it's not a book, it can just be a 15-page pamphlet or whatever it is. And then that now becomes the centerpiece of the whole thing. It's just small and focused and potent and directly focused at your audience. That would be my advice to you on how to put it into the world.
Cool. Makes sense.
Yeah, I can see it too, yeah, psychically.
But how about Stephanie? What have you been brewing on, Stephanie?
Well, thanks, guys. This is a highlight of my week. So thank
Oh,
you
great.
to all
Yeah.
of you. And again, it's so interesting. I guess I'll start from where we are and work backwards because
Okay.
there's something that's, I guess the word I'm looking for is titillating about
Yeah.
meeting with like minds and having
Yeah.
conversations.
Oh, yeah.
There's a difference between this space
Yeah.
and what would feel to be Scott's or my kind of niche space for the work. So that there's an element of, there's something that's different in those two spaces. And listening.
Oh, you mean your professional space and this space?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, definitely, yes. Uh-huh.
So this space is so interesting because Scott, I have a similar thing I'm working through right now with outreach. And I hear people that tell me a lot of the things that people are told is, well, maybe you're afraid, or maybe you don't think you're good enough, or maybe you're going to get bored, or maybe, and actually in the shadow side of me, I've really deeply looked at that stuff, and I've kind of distilled a little bit of a different feeling. Maybe it's coming from the feminine. And one of my, I don't know if it's a problem or a concern or even an anxiousness, is along my journey, I have been radically misunderstood and different in my approach. So there's something about me not wanting other people to misunderstand and feel triggered. It's like I want to kind of offer this like love and protection, because this work can be naturally very triggering. So it's one of those things where I have this feminine compassion that wants to present, but also do it in a very, very loving and not jabbing, triggering way.
Right.
So I think my kind of anxiousness, that's the word that wants to come through about putting myself out there, is I'm not putting myself out there for any sort of an ego. And in fact, it's the very opposite of that that holds me back. It's this, I don't want to be misunderstood. And even if somebody does understand, I don't want them to somehow pedestal me or be like, oh, you know what you're talking about. That's amazing. So it's this, what I'm working through is the acceptance of what I do know and my difference. And also I'm trying to work through this, I understand that I'm misunderstood by the groups of people and dynamics I have had to interact with.
Yes.
There's a difference in placement, and I accept that and I understand that. But I guess the root of this is I never want anyone to feel like I have something they cannot attain. And that holds me back from being my greatest self. So I think sometimes I'm afraid to put myself out there because I don't want to be on the stage. I don't want to be. It's like I'm kind of actively rejecting this role of what could be, because I don't ever want, I want everybody to, it's this Mother Teresa energy of like, whatever I have or I'm covering is just as accessible for you as it is for anyone else. So then I consciously try to keep myself a little smaller because maybe it's just a fear of stepping into what my role actually is part of. Is like Melissa, like you're on like stage, right? So it's one of the things where I feel like if somehow I'm on stage, because of the amount of trauma we have in the world, and because of the way people put power in others who have a position of being on stage, that somehow I don't want to contribute to that old paradigm of, because this person's on stage, I have to look up to her and follow her. That's what I can't seem to reconcile. How do I fill that role and not have people perceive it in the old paradigm way of trying to, like, I'm not, like, I don't want to be better than anyone. So I'm trying to work through this.
Yeah, so there's the thing that came up, the word that keeps going through my head with what you just said was being misunderstood.
Right.
There's the outer world is just a manifestation, right, of other aspects of what is going on inside of you right now.
Right.
Right. The outer world
So-
we find ourselves in.
Yes. So I would ask, where else in your life have you felt misunderstood?
Right. I feel as though the misunderstanding doesn't feel like the root issue, because that's something that I understand in this path, that it's not the common path. So that's I understand that's a gift. But what my catch-all is, and I know this lies within me, is that the audience doesn't perceive me in the old 3D paradigm way from the Matrix.
Right.
So I'm trying to say, this is the word that's been coming up for me the most, is Stephanie. It's the approach and the label. Like there has to be something in how I'm approaching this that I haven't quite distilled yet, to the degree where I feel comfortable coming out as broad as I can and being received in a way, like I feel like there's something that I have to do in order to feel like my audience is perceiving me from a higher perspective, and not from, like, if you, for instance, if you guys were to go do a show about your work and you were in a group of people who were perceivably in the Matrix and in green, what I'm really trying to do is work in this space between, environmentally, between like first tier, second tier. Like, this is what it is for me.
Oh, listen.
No,
Go ahead. No, go ahead. I want you to finish because but go ahead.
How do you become, and Melissa, you said this too, this is what came up for me first, is the physical detoxification that's happening within me, and realizing that I've done a degree of inner awareness and I've committed to the work forever, right? So that now I'm being called to do all of the things in physical reality again.
Right.
Really put yourself out.
Yes.
My hands have been tingling, my feet have been tingling. And I'm like, okay, so now it's time to really observe these communications and these lessons that are happening in relationship, and you being able to see the complexes playing out in someone else. And in that moment of really seeing the complex and really understanding your part in it is to, how or do I respond in a way, like, what is the best way to respond now physically when you're coming from this new space? How do we act? How can we best interact with the world from this new space that's of love, that's not triggering or snarky or you're asleep, you're like, I don't want that anymore.
Yeah.
I want it to be this coming out with love of, like, yes, I've been through some inner shit, but I see that you're going through it, but I have no hierarchy in my, like, no judgment. Like, how do I go back and really love the world as it is and not let it affect me or make me feel like they're not going to, like, I don't know. I don't want to come out, because then they're going to think I'm better than them.
This is great what you've said. So what you've delivered from my point of view is you've shown me you've shown me the facets of I don't want to use the word complex in the way I've been using it, but a complex, it's like it's almost like there's 4 or 5 different elements, like a molecule, like an ego molecule. And at the center of this molecule is your highest purpose and some kind of a healing function, love, and it's trying to go into the world, but it's almost like if you look at chemistry, at a molecule, how you have different elements, and they may be more or less stable, or they may be only temporarily there, and then they may shave off in a different environment, and it's kind of like a collection of elements that are traveling, that is trying to form itself into a coherent molecule that can get into the world.
So you guys, this is
Yeah.
so profound for me personally, subjectively, because when I was 19, I was diagnosed with a autoimmune disease and all sorts of issues that led into other issues. And I know it comes from my trauma. I can see exactly how it occurred. But
Yes.
what you're saying right there makes me feel like, it's like, did you guys ever see the movie Tenet? Like, I feel like I'm in, oh my gosh, Tenet.
Okay, I'll watch it. All
I
right,
have to
movie
watch
Tenet.
that. Tenet, yeah.
Okay.
There's something in there called a temporal pincer. Okay,
A
which means,
temporal pincer.
yeah, so they
Uh-huh.
talk about this capacity to, and they actually use different squads of people, red and blue squad, which to me
Yeah.
are like the masculine and feminine. And
Yes.
they talk about how we're able at some point to go forward and backward in time simultaneously. And each of these energies, one is actually moving back and one is moving forward. And what happens when they collide? So what it feels like to me is going back out feels like a return to innocence. Okay, so this is what I realized, is that the only reason we need awareness is because we've become radically unaware. Because a child, an innocence, they don't need to be aware. They already are open, and they have a degree of receptivity with the world, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, they're more present with the ongoing input and less with projected thoughts and fantasies. And they're actually fantasizing too, actually, but
they are.
less the world the symbolic world is less imprinted on them. Yes.
Right. So for me, I feel like I'm returning to interacting with people who may be unsafe as my child self would have perceived it to be. And I'm trying to create, or here's what I see it as. Complexes to me physically, because I have this very big physical body association, is biofilms. And it feels to me like I'm trying to go back out into the world and interact with these energies that might not have love. And not,
It's being unsafe.
Yeah, and not
feeling unsafe.
Yeah, so not creating, like going out and not creating these films between me and people. So trying to really stay fully open-hearted and present with people, no matter what is coming through them. Because I'm really recognizing how I created these films and walls, which contributed to my disease, for protection, how that affected my body. So now I feel like I'm going backwards, and I'm saying I'm getting another try to go back out and interact with a world that does sometimes and is sometimes unsafe. It is. But to realize the faith and trust I have within myself, and to realize that this is someone else's issue, and it's not my issue that I need to protect myself against. So just staying within my core and letting them, seeing all the things that are playing out, and not feeling like I have to fix them in order for me to feel safe, or even get involved in their field. To just be like, I'm myself and I love them, but I see everything that's going on, but I don't have to change or react or do anything to feel safe against the matrix or the world out there, because I am already. I already am safe. I already am in purpose.
Yes, that part, you have that figured out. That's common sense. That's you coming in as a parent, the higher thinking capacity of you coming in and giving advice to your younger self that is scared of being hurt, and saying, here's a way to manage the situation. And so that sounds like that function, that problem solving protective function is operating in you. And so you're listening to that, and that's giving you good advice, and that's good. But then, and then also there's this thing of this wave of this wave that we all go through, where we go through periods of introversion to periods of extroversion,
Yes.
and inner work and then outer work.
Yes.
And I know that I've watched myself go through a few of these phases, and I've noticed that what happens is when I shift into the external, when I shift into the going out into the world mode after being internal for a while, then I project onto that phase fantasies that are unrealistic. And so I either project a greater threat of the world than actually exists, or I project grandiosity, such as a greater task or duty or gift that I have that's so big that how do I deal with it? And after going through some of these, I've kind of realized that the intuition that I'm moving into an outer mode now. I'm going into the world. I'm going to have to be going on stages. I'm going to have to be writing books or doing podcasts or seminars or whatever the world is. When I think about that and I imagine that, then what I do now is I bring it all down to size. I bring it all down to size, and I just put it in the most practical and humble terms. So instead of thinking about my next TED Talk, it's more on every other Saturday on Zoom with 4 people.
Right. And what's so interesting,
Bring
Scott,
it down.
I've done this already because I used to hold seminars at my studios.
Yeah.
So I've spoken in front of many audiences.
But here's the difference, though, and I've done this too, and I've played music in front of hundreds or thousands of people, and it's the same time. Now, though, it's one thing getting up in front of people and getting into the world and being part of a community and being a member of that community and speaking the language of that community, and the other people, your colleagues, are on the same page with you, and the audience is on the same page with you, and it's that kind of environment. But there's a difference between doing that and then, after years of doing inner work, discovering some authentic truths that are true for you and you believe could be true for them too, and that maybe they are out of the awareness of the public, and that you have discovered something from being an outsider. You were a hero and you went on a hero's journey, and you went through these trials and tribulations, and through that you grasped some treasure, some boon, as Joseph Campbell calls it, and now it's time to return the boon to the world as some kind of wisdom that only a hero can deliver, because they went through the trials, the ordeals, and you're detecting that you're a hero and that you're on that swoop, and you look back at your situation and you say, this is the belly of the beast I was in, and I am a hero, and I am coming out of the underworld now, and I am going back into the world, and I have something that I got from that nobody else, or that few can see, and now I'm here to deliver that. And now thinking about how you're going to deliver this authentic piece of gold, authentic, like AU, authentic, actual gold, to this society that didn't know, your colleagues, this group, whatever, that didn't know they were even missing that. And now you're here with that, and you are looking for the proper way to deliver it, the proper way to put it, the proper way to all this kind of stuff. And behind it, there is this fear that maybe these people cannot take what you have.
It's not
They're
even
going
like
to
that.
misunderstand you.
But what if it's,
They're going to kick you off
what
the
if
stage.
they don't care?
They don't care about
that,
your goals.
They don't care.
And that is back there, and they're just going to straight out reject it and slam the door on you.
You know what's so interesting, guys, is listening to you, it just really hit me, is that the past week or two I've been processing the words approach and label, like how I approach something, and also
Yes.
label. And
Yes.
what's so interesting is I shouldn't need a different approach if I'm authentic. There doesn't need to be really a super structured approach if I'm really
No.
just coming out as a
Being
subjective experience
Authentic, yes.
and telling my authentic story. There doesn't need to be an approach in that.
No, what you're trying to do, and I'm this is why we're hanging out, is because we're very similar in these ways, and we have very similar wounds, all of us who are on this call right now. And so you are trying to control the message and to hone it and perfect it. This is my, Nutri-Shake with all this special ingredients and all this, and I'm going to deliver this to the world, and I want them to say, wow, this is so tasty and good, and man, you're a really good chef, and blah blah blah. And you're looking for, how can I chemically alter this precious molecule so that the society or this group or whatever can take this in, and that this seed can be accepted and it can grow, and I can feel like my life's purpose is being fulfilled. And right? And we're there too with you. And listen, and this is a problem just below all this, is if you have, this is the archetype of the outsider. This is the archetype of the outsider, and the sort of paradox of the outsider. The outsider, if you were not an outsider, you wouldn't have anything original to give. Mm-hmm. And you would just be a synthesizer, you would just be a parroting, you'd be part of the matrix, taking ingredients, baking them into bread, selling them at the store. That's necessary, but you're not inventing anything. There's nothing new. There's nothing evolutionary happening, because evolution doesn't have to occur all the time. We need stability. We need people to bake bread and change tires and all that stuff. So but you're not in that category. So you're an outsider. So by being an outsider, and a lot of outsiders are turned into outsiders by childhood trauma and things like that. So you're thrown out of the matrix. And so you're an outsider, and from being an outsider, now you're going around the matrix and you're like, oh, I can see that, I can see that, I can see that. I've also learned stuff through my own heroic journeys. I got stuff that people might, other people who could use, and you're an outsider, you got stuff. But now, as an outsider, you are now, because you've been an outsider for so long, because you're so identified unconsciously with being an outsider. In fact, you can't actually ever be a real insider. You can't, because to be a real insider, you will have to let go of your authenticity, because insiders are not authentic. They're collectivists. And so they're not individualists. And so
there are people now that are authentic, that are really out there. I mean, I just thought of Joe Rogan, for instance.
But so Joe Rogan is sort of straddling the line, and
he is authentic.
Oh, he's definitely authentic, but he's so basically what we see,
he doesn't care. He's just doing.
But as the society evolves, right? As social evolution occurs, different people with different constitutions are pulled into different roles to serve a purpose, right? So that Joe Rogan molecule, or Tony Robbins, or whoever you're looking at, or Gene Houston, or whoever, they get pulled in because they have a unique thing, and then boom, they plug in, and then they offer their thing
It's
for
a
a
certain
while,
kind
and then
of
they
recipe. It's
a certain recipe. And what people are trying to do is that they're trying to reformulate their own recipe to find where they plug in.
Instead of allowing the mystery, allowing God to,
and it's so hard. And so
Yeah.
what you were trying to do is, so you're an outsider, you're trying to find out, well, where can I plug in? I'm never going to be a true insider. I'm never going to be, the head of the CDC or whatever. I'm not going to be that person. I have to sort of be authentic. The head of the CDC is a paid liar and a paid propagandist and salesperson and all that. They're not authentic. You're not going to be that. So you have to be an outsider to some degree. And you're trying to find out, like we are, well, where on the outside of the collective chemistry of the matrix of society do I plug in? Because there's all kinds of outsiders that found some, artists especially, that found some, way of plugging in, and then all of a sudden, their art just kind of went into the world and it did its purpose, and they can relax and they can die knowing I live my purpose.
wouldn't it be just the same information that you gave Scott? You just
Yes.
hone the jewel,
Just
do the shadow work as stuff comes up,
right.
and then you just put it
Into the world in a very in a finite, in a small and manageable way, and then you test it and see how it works
Right.
with a very small audience.
Right, and
you
it'll
kind of
almost go where it needs to go on its own.
Yes.
just kind
Make
of
its
go
own
where,
pathway.
and at the same time you're going to have to now and then try to come to terms with the amount of time that it takes, that you might be, all outsiders have this problem, they might be only 3 years advanced, like from this let's say milieu that they're supposed to plug into. They might be 30 years advanced,
Or
they
it
might be
might-
300 years
Yeah,
advanced.
exactly. It might not even be in,
And there's a lot
in
of
our lifetime.
That's right. There's people that we
Yeah.
now are finding that we never even knew about, Greek philosophers that never even got known.
Right,
And so you have to deal with the feelings and all of that come up, to realize that I have to accept, as long as I'm honing my life art, as long as I'm taking steps to offer it to the world the best way I can, without a lot of grandiosity, without a lot of, without a lot of just expectations. As long as I'm putting it out there and I'm perfecting it, and I'm dealing with the fear of rejection and all that kind of stuff, I'm just doing the best I can on my thing, and I'm staying on perfecting my art, then you have to deal with the fact that you don't control how long it might take for it to take, or if it will ever take in your lifetime. And that might mean that you might get flooded in with feelings of rejection that we want to distract away from, and we want to try to problem solve our way out of maybe I will be an outsider and my highest purpose will be rejected by the matrix for as long as I'm on this planet in this incarnation. And you have to accept that really nasty possibility.
I've had
Probably
to
not going
do
to
that.
happen, but you have to accept it in
I've
case
had
it
to
does.
do that completely with my own music.
She's a
and
good
art.
example of
I'm-
this.
Yes.
She's a good example.
I have
She
had-
has been struggling to be a successful musician
My whole life.
her whole life, since she was 6 years old.
No, earlier.
And she has
Yeah.
been adopting herself and wondering, maybe I need to plug in here, maybe I need to plug in here, maybe
Keep
I have to learn
writing,
this style,
keep-
learn that style, and
Yeah.
then it's maybe I'm too old now, and then blah blah blah, and it's just, she's been dealing with it the whole time.
But it's more, it's like you get to a point where I'm at right now.
I'm yelling because I got these headphones in.
I'm getting to a point now where the goal that I have of being an artist that is so filled with depth that it scares people sometimes.
Yeah, keep talking. This is very important. Yeah. So
It's
so
so-
your gold,
This whole thing about width and depth.
right?
I have always been a deep artist.
Right.
And so finding a place, especially being in modern times, for that kind of depth in a world that's in flatland,
Right.
I've had to come to a place where I have to be okay with just being an artist, putting it out, and maybe not receiving
And
anything.
and instead
Anything.
of marketing yourself better,
Right.
instead of trying to connect with other connected people,
just
take new voice lessons from some other teacher to perfect your voice,
Right.
or just work on your songs and just do your thing better as an artist and just perfect your life art.
Right.
And put it into the world, and then go through the process of all the feelings of rejection and all that kind of stuff, and use that as an opportunity to iron all that out. Because ultimately, you know, Stephanie,
ultimately, Van Gogh did not think about.
Van Gogh didn't, and he wasn't even known.
He ended up killing himself because his complexes were so
What
him over.
There's 7 billion people in the world, and most of them
Right.
like to be entertained and art and all that kind of stuff. It can't be that what she's doing is so deep that the world just can't accept it. It can't be that there's not some Greek or Thai person or something
Right.
like that sees it online and goes, "Oh my God, she's awesome. I'm going to show this to my manager or whatever." And he's going to say, "I think we need you opening up on our tour in Thailand. My audience would love this." How come that's not happening? There's an audience for everybody, for everything.
Right.
You can be, you know, and so the reason why that's not happening is because there's still so much viral garbage cloud
Right.
around that's all up in her ego and stuff and all this stuff.
Yeah, it's
Junk.
still, and I have been doing this
Imperfections.
work for 10 years now, and I'm only now have these relationships and have done enough emotional processing and letting go and surrendering
Constantly
to
letting
death.
go of expectations.
Just constant letting
It's hard.
go.
I watch her
And-
go through it. It's
and-
hard.
And so where I'm at right now is I have to be completely accept that the seed that's coming through me is authentic, it's perfect the way it is, and then I just let it out in the world in whatever way it's supposed to come out, whether it's through metal or this other stuff that I do, and be okay with that, you know, just
I have to
be
bring-
okay.
I have to bring this up because this is another thing that I feel is important and that I've been processing. And even though I'm not a musician, I realize that I actually am an artist,
Yeah.
Right.
even though I work with the mind.
That's
Right.
why we call it life art.
Right. So I'm an
Right.
artist. And what
You're
I
an artist.
realize is I'm carrying this trauma from childhood and from the collective
Yes.
that I will never be supported for what I do because it's different. So I'm
Right.
holding this trauma of famine. Now, look it, I live in a nice small apartment and I'm supported by a physician. Like I don't have a traditional source of income. I'm working in those connector pieces for the medical community as
Right.
the outsider. I'm getting exactly what I want
Good.
in a sense, but
Yes.
I don't want to have to be connected to
Mm.
somebody who's an insider to get the financial support and the stability that I need. I want to be able to cultivate that for myself. So I'm holding this energy of like the performer that's like, okay, I went to see Bob Dylan at Farm Aid years ago, and the entire set he played was new stuff. And everybody was like, we wanted to hear all of his old stuff. So it's like one of those energies of like, but I change and grow so quickly.
Yeah.
And evolve so quickly that I can't commit to you that I'm going to be able to provide you this service today, because I actually might evolve from this service and it might look different tomorrow. So there's this innate,
that's artists do that. Yes.
yeah, there's this innate fear within me that I'm going to have to sell out to be supported
Right.
somehow, which I won't do. I've
Right.
already realized, like, I'll starve before I sell
Right.
out, which is a
Right.
rule.
That's a good rule.
Right. But
That's
then
good.
also trusting, really, like you said, totally being as crazy and eclectic and authentic as possible. And really just like, look, if I end up broke on the corner and not supported, I'll have to deal with it then.
Well, I work retail. I mean, I work
You're-
at Whole Foods.
You're gonna have to compromise.
You know, that's just the way that it
you
goes.
don't have to compromise by being a liar and selling
Right.
snake oil and all that kind of stuff, but you're going to have to compromise in that you're going to have to feed yourself. Now, if you just can stay out of debt and not have any extra overhead and just
Right.
live a somewhat austere life,
That's what I have. It's
that's
very,
what we do
everything
too.
is very small. I have this apartment is like this big. It's beautiful, but it's
Yes.
this big.
Yes.
No bills, nothing.
That's
But
good.
at some point, I've realized that my traumas have to do with feeling safe and stable. And when
Yes.
I have that
Me
safety,
too. Sir
when I
too.
have that safety and stability, guess what my art does? I don't want to have to be the artist who I'm just saying this like, oh, I create my best work when I'm completely incoherent and trashed. Like, I want to be very consciously creating my work and be able to get sustained for what I do. If I have money and safety and security, my creations can get better. I don't want to listen to this.
That didn't happen to me when I had money. When I had money and as I was all secure, I lost creativity and energy.
Well, this is what I want to change. I don't want artists to have to suffer to produce good shit. I'm trying to change that narrative to say, I've already suffered, and that's how I've accumulated a lot of my work, but I don't want to do it that way anymore.
I agree with you.
want to be stable and supported and get my needs met and remain creative. I don't want to have to suffer to be awesome. I don't want to do that.
And you don't, and there's no rule, because there's artists that are prolific in all different kinds of environments. There's really suffering artists, and there's artists that are incredibly prolific and incredibly pampered, and and everything in between. And so you don't have to. You basically. It's almost okay. So that
Well, it does happen naturally because our situation here is absolutely perfect for us now, and I got to cut back, so I only have to work.
We're getting
2
a free.
days
We were living
week.
in. Okay, so I had in the Bay Area, California. I had one of these roll-up door warehouses, and it was in an industrial area where there was other. Mostly artisans like cabinet makers and stuff like that. And this is pretty common that artists get lofts or spaces in industrial places, and then they set up their shop there or whatever. And so I have my recording studio there, and it was converted. I worked on it and converted it and had shower, and it was a living space too. And there was other people in the building doing the same thing. But it was like warehousey, and it was in a warehouse. It was in an industrial neighborhood, and the highway overpass was right there, and it wasn't really comfy, and it was fine, but we were like, okay, this is kind of.
It was a variety of different things that happened.
And I kept saying to myself, I was saying, this isn't really the nicest way to live. I sure would like to kind of have some nature and get away from the traffic and all this kind of stuff and have something better. But my situation was that I was not willing to go into debt. I was not willing to go get, I did work part-time for Whole Foods 2 days a week at one point, but for about over 20 years, I just worked for myself and did all kinds of different things besides audio work to pay the bills, and then I rented out some of the space of the warehouse to other people for storage. So my total bills of everything, of my rent and my utilities, not including food, but everything else, all my necessary stuff, was $800 a month. And I kept it that way for years, and then I could work on myself. I could be an artist. I could have a sort of an outsider life and all that kind of stuff. And I had to be creative. And there was different times
and there
when
was stressful.
there was it was a
times.
constant kind of wave of, okay, I'm doing fine for a while, for 6 months or whatever, and then business is slogging in some way, and now I'm gonna have to find some other way. I did different kinds of coaching. I did all kinds of different things, and
But then, so we started.
But we
doing
kept saying,
all
okay, we're doing all this work, and we're like, okay, where's the outer world as we're working through all this garbage? Where's the outer world mirroring
Right.
where
the
we're
sort
at.
of ease that should be coming into life as we are reducing this inner conflict?
Right.
And we kept on saying, it's going to show itself. It's going to show itself. It just doesn't happen as fast as we think and all this. And then at some point after the whole COVID thing started, and it was just all garbage, and my European tour with my band got canceled and all of this.
And California
was just turning
mess.
into a wreck. And
Yeah.
we were like, we got to get out of here. And I arranged for a friend of mine, an old friend of mine who's also a musician, to take over my warehouse and let me store my stuff there and just take it over. Introduced him to the landlord. He took it over. We packed as much as stuff we could in her car. And then our plan was to come to Austin to visit my family who's here in Austin and stay at my
Maybe
mother
for
and
a
stepdad
month.
have two properties, one in San Antonio, one near Austin, and to stay at this property here, because they're not here that often, for a couple of months and figure out what we were going to do next. And we just went into mobile mode. We don't know where we're going. We don't know what we're going to do. And once we got here, we realized, oh crap, they really need help. They're elderly now. They can't handle their estate. They can't.
Oh, it's a
there's-
whole
they have
other challenge.
all kind of challenges
Yeah.
with them, but they're letting us stay in this property rent free.
And so we work for them.
And so we
one
work for
day.
them, and then she works for Whole Foods
For
a couple days a week, and then I do my audio work, and I got my studio set up in one of the bedrooms, and
So it
we're
worked
dealing with
out,
my mom and,
but-
and certain
Yeah,
emotional issues there and stuff.
it comes to another level
But it's
of work.
but the physical part we got worked out, and we're chilling, we're just relaxing in the physical part, and that was something that showed itself and showed up as and it didn't happen in the way we thought it would, and it didn't happen in the time we thought it would.
And even the process, since we've been here for now 2 years now,
Yeah.
I had no idea that I was going to go deeper into my own process of healing the stuff with my mother through
Right,
his
her,
mother.
she's healing her mother wound through interacting with my mother.
Because they have the same complex.
So this is kind of like all we could do is just keep doing the work, keep
Yeah.
having faith that the work will result in progress, and then just let it happen in its own timeline and stay authentic and don't get over your head with bills and stuff, and so that you're not forced
and
into things.
what I was gonna say is
just cruise.
I looked at your podcasts, and they're very professional and they're very good. There's no reason that you should.
Are her Facebook videos, you mean?
No, her YouTube podcast.
Oh yeah, I just discovered that, and we watched one of your interviews. So you've been doing podcasts, you've been doing an interview
and
program.
you're very good at it. It's
Yeah. Oh
very
yeah, we did. That's right.
natural.
We said that. We looked
Yeah.
at that one and we said she's very good at. Oh yeah, you're. And I just thought, well, in this milieu, I thought you're as good as anybody that's in that milieu, being an interviewer and being a host of a show and
Yeah,
bringing
you're
people
very
together.
natural, so it
So-
feels like it's authentic to
Yeah.
you to do that. So I would just say keep doing it.
Translating that into money and income, though, is understandably a challenge.
But I think
Especially because I'm not techie, so the actual world of tech and setting up podcasts and all of that, I mean, I was able to do it enough.
On Zoom, right?
On Zoom, but as so far as taking it to the next level, or I don't
Oh.
even do podcasts.
I'll
right?
help you with the equipment and stuff. You don't even need just a couple $100 worth of equipment. I'll show you what to get or whatever, and you can
Yeah,
go to the
because
next level.
actually it's so interesting that you said that, because I thought to myself I should get back to doing that, because I've
Yes.
done things that can provide me side income that are exactly in alignment with who I am. And for some reason I was saying, no, I better go get a job somewhere else because I don't feel like I want to do that. And I was like, why would you
Right.
not want to incorporate these past pieces of you that are actually good? Because like, for some reason you have a block against it. Like, I was going to go get a job at my Whole Foods, and I thought to myself, Stephanie, you have coached before and you've made money, you've had
Right.
podcasts, why are you running away from that? Because actually that's natural to you. There was something
Right.
that I wanted to run away from and just be away from it. I don't
Oh
know.
yeah. That sounds like my story exactly too.
Because what it
Yeah.
is that these complexes will go right into the
Where you're weak.
jewel and where you are authentic and where you do shine.
Yeah.
So if you're aware of that, but what you have to do is just start to become aware of these thoughts that are coming up, and then ask yourself, where is this coming from? Where did I feel this before, right?
Yeah.
And then if you start to feel any kind of fear or sadness or anything, that's when you just sit in it and start to process that emotional energy, and you're getting more awareness. And then you take steps in the world. You say, okay, well, now I'm going to set up a new podcast. I'm going to set up an interview. And you just follow through, and you just keep, Ram Dass said this, polishing the mirror, right? You just keep polishing.
Yeah.
I've gone through the same thing that you're going through, the exact same thoughts. It's sort of a combination of okay, well, I'm good at this. I like doing this. I need to put this into the world. There's no reason why this can't generate income, and that kind of a thought. And then you start it, you look at it, and you think, oh, well, this is pretty esoteric, and there's so much competition out there, competition for people's attention and all of this. I mean, there was a phase for several years where my specialty was foreclosure litigation. So there was all these people in foreclosure after the financial crisis, and I just dug into this subject matter through a friend. I found this subject matter. I dug into it, and I absorbed all this information, and I learned methods for defending people in foreclosure. And then I was in a group temporarily, but then I started doing it on my own, and I just offered myself as a coach to teach you how to do letter writing, how to stall your foreclosure, or how to put together a case that you could then give to your lawyer, or how to fight it in court yourself. And because people were losing their homes, and I charged $100 to $125 an hour, and I did coaching on the phone with people, and then I would put together papers of basically, I would say, here's everything you need to establish your case. And I would put together analysis papers, and I would analyze their title and everything else, and I put a recommendation for their lawyer, and I put it all together, about a 10-page packet, and I would charge between $500 and $1,000 for those. And then they're very useful to people, because the lawyer that's going to charge you $200 or $300 an hour, he's going to take this, and it's going to basically save you, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 of their research by having this whole thing pre-provided for you. And I can keep you in your house I could do 5 letters for you over the course of a year for $500, and you could stay in your house for a year just from letter writing. And so it was very affordable, but very useful. And people were losing their houses, so they wanted that work. And so I stayed busy doing that. That and my audio work, and that worked. And then what I started to do is, check this out. I started to so this is like 2014 by the time this happened, I started to realize, I had already realized, but I really started to realize after working with all these people that they had a lot in common, and that they were all running away from stuff, and they were all putting too much focus on their assets and my house and my money and this kind of stuff. And they were being too focused on that. And behind the foreclosure was, how did you get in foreclosure? Why did you sign this obviously garbage contract? Did you really think that you would be able to pay this mortgage after the balloon rider kicked in and doubled or tripled your payments? You really thought that you were going to ascend up the ladder, the corporate ladder, in 5 years to where you would be able to afford this? Or why did you do this? And what was behind this? And then you find out there was all these fantasies that were behind their getting into a house that was over their heads, or there was a divorce, or there was a medical emergency, and there was all this personal trauma drama stuff that was behind the foreclosure, and the foreclosure was a symptom of a deeper problem. So I started trying to change my coaching to go into life coaching to try to help them get back to, well, what's going on behind all this? And they didn't want that. And what happened was, I mean, not that they said, I'm not listening to you, they just didn't call back.
Yeah.
And so what ended up happening was the whole legal system conspired against the all the people in the foreclosure movement, and basically shut off the legal avenues for them to get remedy. And it came to the point in about 2014 where nothing I could do would actually work in court anymore. It did for a while, but it stopped working. And so I couldn't honestly sell those packages anymore. And they didn't want my life coaching because they didn't want me to help them get to their garbage. Mm-hmm. And so that whole thing just crashed. And then I thought, well, so now here I am, and the kind of stuff that I'm talking about is the same kind of stuff that I tried to talk to the homeowners about 10, 12 years ago, and they didn't want it. And I'm finding out that even the people that are more new agey or more spiritual and stuff, they won't come on the Zoom calls either. And so everyone's afraid of looking at their garbage, and I'm the guy who's focusing on how to process your garbage. And so that's part of my highest purpose, but yet the people in the matrix and money and all that is not in that area. What to do?
Well,
same problem you have.
it is, but I do see that shifting in the matrix now. A lot
Maybe
more
I'm just
since,
too advanced and I came in too early.
Well, I mean, look at all the trauma work that's coming out, Gabor Mate and all these people. There's
Yes.
a lot of people, and shadow
Yes.
work wasn't even in the conversation.
There actually is
like
now.
5 years ago.
There
when-
actually is. And I look at that and I'm just like, okay. And it's funny because I put my stuff out into the world. I put it on Facebook. Facebook tags it as COVID misinformation, even though it's not even that. And it's just like, doesn't get any play. Or YouTube won't populate our channel into the stream, so other people that are interested in our stuff don't even see it. And so like the matrix is saying, no, you're not going to come in here with your alchemical stuff. We're keeping it out.
Yeah,
And
you know what's so interesting is there was a video that I made on my YouTube page. Again, my same YouTube page. I have two. I have the Awakening Healthcare that I did with
Okay.
a physician
I
colleague.
think that's the one we saw, right?
My own personal stuff that I've just been doing for the last 6 or 7 years.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is, you know, I made all these videos and so few
Yeah. Views.
right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, like either I'm really, you know, like,
Yeah.
I'm like either I'm really shitty or nobody's resonating with this or whatever.
Right.
But strangely, I just went back in to look at my numbers
Yeah.
after like 2 years.
Yeah.
And there's a video that I made like 3 years ago called like something like addressing the false light. And all of a sudden the views are like,
false
way
light.
up. And I'm like, wow, this is so interesting. Like this is my most viewed video that I made like 3 years ago. Like all of a sudden the views just skyrocketed. And I had a guy, a doctor, he'd always say to me, you know, Stephanie, he goes, you got to pump the brakes. He goes, "You're like 2 to 3 years ahead of everyone." And I always used to laugh at him. And
Yeah.
at some point, like I again, it's not my hubris. It's like actually maybe we are just cultivating content. So when people are interested in it, it can already be there. And
Yeah,
we continue
yeah.
to do work while other people distill some of the stuff that we've done several years.
Yes, that too. And I just saw this girl. Somehow it showed up in my feed. She's not one of my friends. She's about 20, I'm guessing 25 years old. She's like a hippie. And uh, she is speaking whatever the new version of new age lingo is now. And it's sort of it's kind of mixed. It's kind of got a hippie kind of vibe. It's got a new age thing in there. It's got a little bit of this new stuff in there about the shadow, and she's focusing on the shadow and stuff. And her language is to me, it's quite mythological. And I try to stay away from the mythological and stuff. But she gets massive views. And she just puts her personal stuff up on there and stuff. And that it just reminded me of how if you're tapped into the zeitgeist of what the language is, of the myth, and you can speak that well, then that will transmit. But for me, it's too mythological, and it's like all the new age stuff that happened before 2012. What's going to happen in 2012? And we're going to ascend and ascendance and singularity, or whatever it was, however it was put, all that mythology and everything, which was mixed with some ancient wisdom and all of that, but it was very mythological. And then it really fell on its face and crashed after 2012, and nothing substantial really happened.
Right.
That whole movement took a hit, and then now it's trying to come back with kind of a new flavor, but it's still the New Age movement. And so this is another problem, is that if you are really tuned in and that's where you're at, and you believe that your mythology is reality, then just go for it, and you're off to the races, and great. But if you look at that and you go, that's not really, that's kind of mythological, and what is the real truth is a little more down to earth and a little more pragmatic, and requires a little more heavy lifting and work. And this is kind of just puffing it up and distracting away from the real work. If you realize that, well, then you're screwed, because the people don't want to taste nasty medicine.
Yeah, I think that really you just need to hone into what it is that you are.
So we're in the same boat that you're in. We're all outsiders. Scott's in the same boat. And there's a lot of people like us, and we're in the same boat, and we're
For
really
every
keyed into
Joe Rogan or popular podcast, there are
There's-
millions of people who only get 100 views or 50 views or whatever.
And there's also what if to be popular, the more popular you are, the more enslaved you are to your audience.
Yeah, I have a little bit of a repellent feeling towards the word popular.
Yeah, there you go. That's
I
part of the
never
issue.
wanted that, but that's probably part of my resistance to just
It
coming
is.
out, is I don't want to be popular. I'm the cool outsider chick. I don't want to be popular. I sit in the back of the I don't want to be. So that's part of my obvious.
That's shadow stuff there.
Yeah, but like to me, it's like the cool people are the outsiders. That's the assumption that I hold, right? Is like the cool people are the outsiders, and I'm trying to realize, and through a relationship that I had with somebody who was a deep insider, I was like,
Yeah.
actually, he's pretty cool, and he's like a
Right.
deep insider. So maybe my
Right.
view on just the outsiders being cool is not true.
Right.
Yeah.
You're in the same place that we're in, and that a lot of people are in, and we're going through the same. We have the same questions, and you've got to plug into the matrix in some way, because I mean, this is just part of, I mean, if the matrix is just society or civilization, that's the way that it's set up, and for good reason, is that money is basically it's social credit, and it basically is a token that says what you're giving to the world is valuable, and that you're a valuable provider to the rest of us, and we're all in this together, and we're all providing for each other's needs. And so whenever you give something valuable to the collective, they say thank you with a little thank you note, and then we can trade our thank you notes around. And so if everyone was just such an outsider and just said F you to the world, all of society wouldn't exist. We have to provide something to the community. And so money, although it's been totally bastardized and all that, the most basic, authentic form of money, if you really looked at who has money and who doesn't, if there was no cheating going on, then the people with money would be the ones who really are offering something valuable to the world. And the people without money are the ones who haven't found something valuable yet that they can give. And it means basically you need to shift your priorities to what people want, because our survival is dependent on that. But now we're at this stage where all the survival needs are met, and there's even robots running things and stuff like that. And now it's more, and money is there's so much cheating going on with money. People that have money, we look at people who have money and we go, oh, well, he must be a very valuable person, and he or she must have something very, very important to offer. And you find out that no, they're gaming the system, they're cheating, or they're part of some pyramid scheme or whatever.
Can I please be completely, like, I want to propose something and be completely vulnerable and tell you
good.
the truth of how I feel.
Yes.
I would love, because of my career right now in Awakening Healthcare with the physician, we are just breaking through to some big advances for us and in the system. So we just got invited to teach at 2 med schools in Texas, right? And the physician I work with is just like close enough to me that we have done so much work together. For her to be wanting to come out of the system slightly to see, and then me trying to, and now she's going back in, using her connections to pull, to I don't know how, pull this back in a little bit, and we're getting in.
That's
now,
great.
But this is what I'd love to do. This is what I'd love to do. I'd love to restart up the podcast. Scott, I already asked you to be on the podcast. I was going to ask both of you. I don't know if I already mentioned it on Facebook posts.
Yeah, we'll do it. Yes.
There's several other people who already agreed to do it, who are awesome. Actually, Colin, the gentleman that you posted a video about the self-esteem.
Self-esteem.
You posted something about it was like the myth of self-esteem. It was this great on like future thinking, big thinking. You posted it on Facebook. It was a video.
I don't remember who that was now. That's my old age.
He was a spine surgeon.
Oh, David Hascom, I think his name is. Yes.
He agreed to do. He's gonna do.
Oh, good for you. That's good. Good.
There's other people who I'm like, I'm gathering some very cool.
Yes.
Oh, that's excellent.
That's good.
So here's what I'm thinking. I would love to start this back up, to start to educate on the benefits of what we're doing insofar as helping people to heal, to help them to understand themselves better, to provide an alternative worldview for people who want to propose it to their patients. But what I'm afraid of, guys, this is it. This is my vulnerability. I am terrified, because I've seen this too many times, of some physician or practitioner or somebody within the system usurping the idea and throwing it in who hasn't really done the work. That's my fear.
Okay. You gotta let it happen. And so you gotta let it happen. You just gotta let it happen.
Happened? The fear?
You gotta let that happen. But you gotta let people rip you off.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
just got to, because every creative person is in this,
Right.
and every band that came up with some cool new sound has been ripped off, and every artist that came up with some cool new style has been ripped off, and you also have to realize that there's nobody's really everybody's a synthesizer anyway.
Right.
No,
Well, I'll
everybody.
own that. I'll
Yeah.
own the ripping off, because you know what? People on my low scale on the totem pole have already done that to me. So I get that.
Yes.
And I'll own that. But the other piece that sits in me is that I have worked with hundreds of patients doing shadow work with them that are very sick and have gotten so much rich benefit from from the work I've done. So
Yes.
really the other piece I need to process is that this will happen. This stealing may or may not happen. I
Oh, yeah.
understand that, but I don't want it to harm patients if it's not coming through a vessel who hasn't done the work. Like that's my fear.
Yeah, but
I
listen,
don't think that'll happen. I don't
no,
think
you're
that'll
here.
happen.
There's
Yeah.
yeah, the harm part.
Let it go.
No, it's I just there's I mean
It's hard enough to even be able to, it's because of your experience and doing it on yourself that you're able to relay and really help other
Right.
people.
Right.
Even if somebody takes some of your concepts, they're not you. And they're not going to be able to give that kind of information. And I don't
Let me
see
be- yeah, let
how
me
that
be
would.
more- Let me tell you more of the fear, because this is me, is that
Right.
if you're working with patients who, for instance, are in kidney failure, they're waiting for a transplant, they're literally physically almost at a death's door scenario.
Yeah.
And so my fear, this is myself, I'm just being honest, is like, well, if someone does it and they do it wrong, and this person's already, you guys know that it requires a level of physicality to emotionally process. So now if we're taking this into the realm of people who are physically very vulnerable,
Yeah.
I feel protective in that state, because my fear is, well, you better be mindful, because this person needs a degree of energy to do this, and you don't want to kill anybody.
Yeah, what if you didn't know from your perspective and where you are that in the future you would look back to whatever you were teaching people, and you would look back and you would say, I was mostly wrong.
Now, I'm sure that probably is true.
what if you're let's say at least 50% wrong, and that you later decide that the way to deliver this information, or the information itself or whatever, needs to be shifted into something else, and that there's a part of what you're offering that's right, but
Yeah.
that and that you're not actually offering the most potent medicine that you could offer if you were only more experienced than you are.
You know what, Colin? This is so interesting, because actually, in my most vulnerable, personally, in my story, physically, is actually the fertile ground I needed to do the work. So maybe my thinking is opposite. Maybe I'm thinking, well, you got to be careful. This is powerful work. It's going to hurt somebody, when actually it could be the opposite, that is the perfect time for them to do the work.
Yes. The only time people will do difficult work is when their world doesn't work for them anymore.
Right.
That's the
True.
only time they're going to do it.
Right.
And so it's the psychic life cycle. And so it's after a crash
Right.
that
Right.
you're in a shambles. That's
Right.
when you're willing to go back and go, I guess everything I thought about myself and the world might have been wrong. And I'm willing to now, because I crashed so hard,
Yep.
adopt a new worldview and maybe a new way of being in the world, because I crashed and I'm hurting. If you're not crashing, if you're not hurting, if you're flying, you're not, nothing can make you change your trajectory.
The first thing that Gabor Mate, I just heard an interview with him, that he would do with a patient, say, who has cancer or is first get them stabilized, and then to start doing the deeper trauma work with them. So first they have to be just basically like in a conscious kind of a, you know, situation where they can physically deal with going
Also,
inside.
but who?
I mean,
But here's the thing: is that everybody's psyche is so different and so situated so
well, you
differently.
have to be able
that-
to.
I mean, check this out: the kinds of people who can do transformative work on themselves are not the kinds of people that need to be guided by surrogate parents. They're not. The kinds of people who need to be guided by surrogate parents are not adult enough to do real work. And what they need is they need the transference to happen.
Yeah, but that's gonna happen.
They need the transference
That's
to
gonna
happen. They
happen
need
naturally.
Jesus, or they need a guru, or they need some kind of a transference.
Well, that's
they
why
need to
they
be able to
have a
put their
doctor.
burden on another person and be healed. It's a more childlike way. The way we're all talking about it here is that you're your own alchemist, you're your own guru, and you're and we're you.
So Colin, the Lincoln guys is what Ruby, my colleague, and I are focusing on right now to take into the system. Is this upstream thought potential of telling students and providers that we want to offer a new worldview, where instead of seeing illness and disease as a problem, we want to change it into potential. So we're trying to have this worldview shift for people to kind of say, oh, like because you're right, Colin, the entirety of the system as it is currently operates as a proxy parent. And then so when you have a patient who's buying into that, and when they're sick, they're supposed to be a victim. Oh, are you okay? I'm so sorry this happened to you. You should take medications to numb yourself out. We're actually coming in and saying, no, actually, we want to try something different. And it's going to require them to not necessarily sit back and take it easy and feel sorry for themselves. This is going to be where they actually are invited to do some work.
Yeah, but this is nothing new, Stephanie. You guys aren't coming up with anything new. This is what people have been coming up for hundreds of years now and trying to interject into the medical system and just being kicked off and saying no, because the whole system depends on the transference. It depends on people identifying as victims. And it depends on the doctor in the robe coming in as daddy to save the day. And
but I've been working with, I'm going to take your advice. I'm going to do it anyway. And if I fail, I fail. And what I'm going to do is I seem to have found providers, people, and a shit ton of patients who are calling me, Stephanie, I need to talk to you. Stephanie, I need to talk to you once a week. How do I get my Stephanie? So there is a great need. And actually, I don't no longer want to be that person that's saving all of these patients behind closed doors. I don't. I want people like us to be like, look, we are all doing this great big body of work, and I want to start highlighting people and talking about it. And if I'm looking for people actually to I'm looking for you guys to say, all of the patients that are coming to me, to say, actually, I don't want to be doing the coaching. Actually, I want to be having these conversations. And if we have coaches, I want to be filtering these people to those people who are really excited about doing the coaching right now. Because I'm not that excited about doing the coaching right now. I was in the past. I'm not anymore.
Okay. So then here you go. Then so then if you're okay. So you're going to have to separate the two modalities. The one modality is the parent-child modality, right? That's that modality. And then the other modality is the do-it-yourself, the self-healer modality.
Right.
Okay. So there's parent-child, save your reality, and then there is the self-healer. Okay.
Is there something in between?
Well, the thing in between is a purgatory state that everyone has to go through so that they can let go of being a dependent child and step into being a independent self-healer.
No, but I know what she's saying. There's some people
Awareness.
who are at the place, because I've actually coached some friends who are having a crisis of
Yep.
some sort, and I give the information to them, and it helps them through that crisis, and it helps, and they grow from that, but they don't necessarily become alchemists.
Okay, okay. So then, all right. So then, what is it that you tell them?
I would.
What do you tell them?
I would talk to them about everything that I talk about: awareness, processing the trauma and the emotion that is around the disease.
Right.
A lot
And
of personal questioning and personal storytelling so we can get a
Yes.
feel of what's going on. So it turns into some sort of therapeutic, tell me
it's
your
a
story
dialogue.
dialogue. Right, right.
Yeah, I would definitely keep looking at Gabor Mate's work.
That's just
because-
talk therapy that's always
No,
out there.
it's more than that. Because
No, not Gabor Mate. I'm just saying, just talking.
well, that's part of it.
Do you
It's-
guys think that there should be any coaches doing shadow work?
Coaches doing shadow work.
Like coaches who are coaching shadow work.
I mean,
yeah, well,
of
sure.
course.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just trying to understand, if we feel like doing the work, taking it from proxy parent to self doing the work, I'm looking for that proper space in between.
I know what
That's
you're
where most of
saying.
my patients, the patients that come to me are like this, they say, guys, everybody says the same thing. I'm a patient, or I've got mental health issues, or I've been through a divorce, or I'm dying, or I have cancer. I go to the doctor, I take medication, I journal, I walk, I eat good, and I'm still not good. I'm still not well. I know you can help me. So I'm like, okay, I see what's going on. They're being initiated to do this deeper transformative work. And I try to kind of
Right.
I used to try to get them to a place to try to initiate it within themselves. So, but I find that some people then think that I'm the one that's helping them.
That's right.
And
That's
I'm
right.
trying to say, actually,
That's right.
I'm not helping you. I'm trying to get you to.
You're a facilitator.
Well, this is the
Facilitator.
archetypal problem in therapy, and it's called the transference and the countertransference.
Right,
And
right.
so and the idea that what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to allow first of all, you have to be mature enough to be able to accept other people's projections of you as parent or savior. And then you have to allow them to project that onto them, right? And then you slowly start to show them their gold, right? You slowly start to encourage them to, because the basic thing that they need to do to start working, if they're saying my life isn't going the way I want it or whatever, I have these problems, well then the thing is how about starting a program where you start uncovering all the stuff that you've been hiding from?
Yeah. So let me
That's
ask you
basically
guys
shadow
this.
work. And that takes them down the road.
If I presented to you an opportunity, I'm just saying this. If I present an opportunity to say like, hey, we're given the opportunity as whatever we want to be called, whatever that label is that we do, right? To do this work with some residents, to see what kind of value they can glean for themselves. There's this aspect of the medical students, they're starting to do things a little different and be out of the box a little tiny bit. So there's this desire to learn how to take better care of the self before the physician comes burnout. So that would be a lot of the stuff that we're talking about. So I'm kind of considering like, what if there's an opportunity where they say, look, we've got these people who are going to come introduce this work that we've been collectively trying to navigate here to see if that can help residents develop a better sense of self. This is what's happening is we all know if you don't do this work and then you're in the field of helping others and you don't know yourself, before you're conditioned and militarized
Yep.
in this
Yep.
system,
Yep.
then you're projecting. They don't realize that the transference and countertransference that's happening with their own patients, that
Yep.
they're projecting onto their patients and vice versa. Then they're caught in this loop. So I'm just kind of throwing that out there, that this is the kind of realm that I'm working with my partner here. And I'm just trying, I guess, for us to like, if there were an opportunity to start to teach this in med schools, would it even be something that shadow workers or people in this realm would want to do? Would we feel an openness to trust to do something like this?
Listen,
And what would it be called and how would it look?
I mean, I hear you here clearly. I've been in the same mindset before. It's been a little while since I was in that mindset, and I'm coming from the exact same position of basically realizing that, you know, some of this fundamental stuff that is in, it's in certain traditions. It's in the Gurdjieffian tradition. It's in the Jungian tradition. It's in certain esoteric traditions. Maybe it's in certain forms of Christianity. There is some of these realizations about the shadow and about shadow work and about self-development, however you put it. It's basically, we're Westerners, it's basically a Western yoga, basically. It's the perennial philosophy, it's the perennial tradition. And we're basically saying, okay, well, we found this tradition, we found this philosophy, we found this alchemy. We had to find it because we almost crashed and burned and died, and it showed itself to us. And now we're on this esoteric path, and we found these truths, and now how can we offer them back to the world? And there is a lot of stuff gets tied up in that process of trying to do that, because you have to ask yourself, why haven't they found it? But when you do get to reach people is when they're sick, it's when they're falling down, that's when they do reach you. And so it is an opportunity to give them a key to a certain path. What you can't do is you can't give them a total methodology and a whole 1, 2, 3. You can't do that because their path is going to be different. But what you can do is that you can give them some archetypal fundamental truths. If you can figure out, and I have my own belief about what I would give if I had my own program like that, some archetypal truths that you would hand to those people. The way I would do this, if I were you, the way, because you're coming at it from a pragmatic problem-solving point of view in a business, and how can I actually do this, stand up this structure and put it in the world? The way I would do it is I would keep it incredibly simple, and I would have no more than 5 points.
Let me ask you guys a question. We
Yes.
have been asked to do presentations.
Yes.
Would you consider or think about us collaborating on a presentation that we're going to do at several med schools, and then actually propose it outwardly? And it might fail, but it might be something that is an interesting thing that, you know, and it couldn't have a reach. And like you said, it may just be a seed, but if somehow they could see, they don't have any, the point is that they don't really, at that point, they're not suffering to the degree where they're going to get that initiation. So at least it might plant a seed for these people in med schools to learn about the self and self-awareness.
Yeah, well, I already, we've done some workshops. We did one for Depth Psychology Alliance. It was a little bit too advanced even for those folks. And so I realized that to do that kind of a thing, it needs to be simplified. And I thought, you know, recently, since I kind of figured out how to put the shadow into the Ken Wilber 4 quadrants, I thought that's kind of cool and technical and novel enough to be kind of cutting edge, and the thinkers would think this is cool, but also simple enough to basically show people, hey, look, do you see on this map where you are? You're in the upper right-hand quadrant of this physical body dysfunction. And can you see how that is only one quadrant of a total sphere? and look at the areas that these three other areas that are also playing into that. And
Right.
so if you're trying to heal the body, but then you can't hold on to the same worldview, and you can't keep doing the same behavior, and you can't have the same, psychological state that goes with that cancer or goes with that whatever it is that they are suffering from. So all of these quadrants have to be addressed. I would probably take that as one kind of part of the workshop. I would also kind of get to the most fundamental idea of inner work in this particular tradition, and how that the shadow work is the fundamental thing, and that your suffering is related to things that you have not maybe known about, but things that have been repressed and shoved away and festering there in the psychology. And now let me give you a simple kind of 1, 2, 3 way of getting into your shadow stuff mentally and emotionally. And then I would give them a little program for looking at the ugly stuff and writing it down, all the ugly stuff. And then I would also plug in there the emotional processing method of how to process their emotions. And that would be the whole thing.
Yeah, so
And
this
that would
is
be it.
just to let you know,
That's how I
I've
would do
been
it.
doing a lot of research with the residents. So the actual demographic of young residents is that they're smart and exceptionally innocent and naive and very excited to be
Oh,
a doctor and help people.
Yeah.
So there's
Yeah, I've
this
seen it.
very young enthusiasm
Yeah.
that they want to help people, but they're
Right.
very naive. So
Very
it's one
naive.
of those things where when they graduate med school, they then realize at some point they've been traumatized, and then they have no way of like doing the work because they're thrown into the demanding schedule of the system. So it's just
I
one
know.
of those things
Well,
where it would kind of be a preventative to burnout. It kind of be like a preventative for self-awareness for the provider, and how that can also translate to be a better practitioner.
okay, yeah. Who's the audience? Is it the person who's suffering on their deathbed, or is it these residents?
There's at this time, it's both. I'm actually seeing
There are
both.
different people in different states. One person is actually ready to do something, or could potentially be ready to do something very difficult because they're going to die otherwise. And then there's the person who's 24 years old and it isn't even near having a midlife crisis, and they're just getting off the runway and starting to fly. And they're not in the same place. Most people don't start doing this work until they get to be at least 35.
So do you feel as though there's a place for a very basic introductory to true self-awareness in med school?
Yeah, I mean, everybody look at the
maybe
opportunity
basic
that
mindfulness
integral
training.
theory, Ken Wilber, and he was plugged into academia or to the edges of it. And he even put out like simple little picture books, like this integral life book and stuff. And he worked very hard to simplify everything, even though it was still too complex, I think, but to put it, and it still only made it into the alternative places of the acupuncturists and the masseuses and the real alternative health providers. They took on some of this stuff, but the mainstream medical system cannot handle it. They don't want it, because with this
do
stuff,
see
you
it
don't need
shifting.
pills and surgery and all that.
I've been looking out there in the world. I do see that shifting.
I'm
with
telling
with Dan Siegel and stuff. He has a whole the brain guy.
Yeah.
He has a whole. I'm on his mailing list now.
Yeah.
He has a whole program now that he's giving, facilitating other doctors.
Right.
So is Gabor Mate.
Right.
Okay.
So
That's baby steps, the way I look at it. But okay, no, you could design a baby steps version of this kind of thing. Kind of just give fundamentals.
Can.
Yeah.
I think you can.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah, I mean, we've been invited to do.
I mean, the
presentations,
fact that you've
so-
been invited, I would say go for it and create something like he's saying, very simple.
Yep.
Definitely he
You know
just,
what, actually, guys, I just
Gave
hit
you the whole thing.
instead of maybe so much, maybe the mindfulness for the resident, but maybe more so teaching them the approach of when you have a patient who's in crisis, that maybe this is a good time to introduce this kind of deeper inner work as a means to help them deal with their emotions of their illness. Maybe that's another way to.
What if I teach these young doctors that that they're that okay for that that if you're okay, what do you want in life? Do you want to drive a BMW or a Tesla or whatever, and have a beachfront property or what all this, and be an author of these important papers or some important practitioner that does TEDx talks or whatever, and have a beautiful husband or wife or whatever, and live this idyllic life? Is that what you want, or is your path in medicine a path to purpose and genius? Do you feel that you may have locked in there somewhere a breakthrough? Are you interested in maybe developing something that's a breakthrough that will help humanity, and or maybe a little of both, and kind of what's in there? And now you start talking to them about this, and what we're offering is we're offering some perspective to people who identify that the most important thing in their life is authenticity. The most important thing in their life is authenticity, and to create a physical life that that serves the development of their highest purpose in this lifetime. And that being a doctor is a way to develop and to unlock and to grow this genius. Now they're going to say that's what we want. Yeah. They're going to say, yeah, that's the side we're on. Authenticity, growing our genius, and all that kind of stuff.
I've already had these conversations, remember, with the young men who are going into medical school.
Yeah, they say that. That's what they want.
They
want authenticity.
I was able to give that advice to somebody who was on their way.
Now, if you're going to offer something truly novel and truly be authentic and truly access some genius and put that into the world, it is a fact for everyone that does this that you're going to get into conflict with the culture around you. There is no story of somebody that invented a technique or a medicine or anything that wasn't fought by their colleagues and tried to shove down and tried to stolen from and all of that. Every one of those guys that won the Nobel Prize tells you about what they went through and the dark nights of the soul that they experienced as they were told that what they were offering would never work.
Yeah, but if you're on your path and this is the authentic seed that you've been given, then you have the warrior in there that you will be able to take on any conflict and learn.
Now, here's the problem. Grow. Okay, that's right. But now here's the thing. So I'm talking to these doctors. I've identified that they want to be authentic, that they want to access their genius, they want to offer something brilliant to the world, or maybe women more often they just want to be part of something that makes a difference. And so that most people are going to say, yeah, they're going to giggle and laugh when you say you want to have the beachfront property and all that kind of stuff, but they're really going to identify with the higher purpose and the genius and the being part of something that changes the world. That's where they're going to be identified with. And then if you tell them the truth, that to be able to really change the world and to access that genius and all that is going to put you at odds with the system while you're in an auditorium and the whole thing is being put on by the system. And you're telling them as they're coming into the matrix that you're going to have to fight the matrix. How's that going to work? People have tried that. They don't get invited to the next one.
Well, yeah, but she already has these things booked, so she might as
No,
well go
I'm
for
just
it.
going
Yeah,
through
I
some of
know
the
you're-
some of the issues here. So now, what most people do when they get a contract to deliver, something beneficial to the existing system, they come up with, you watch their TEDx talks or whatever it is, and their books or whatever, and they come up with this 1, 2, 3 ABC kind of a deal, and everyone's, wow, that's great and stuff. But that's not really where genius and authenticity and real evolution is coming from. Real authenticity and evolution and what really works is to deliver people. It's kind of like Michael Meade, the Jungian, who identified the difference between the elder and the older. The person who grows up and just fits into the world and never really really accesses their highest purpose in this life and never suffers through all the many dark nights of the soul and never develops that wisdom that comes out of suffering and comes out of doing the hard things for the right reason and fighting the system because it was the right thing to do. That person becomes an elder, and then they can offer wisdom to the world. Everybody else becomes an older, just an NPC, and they just get thrown in a nursing home and offed or whatever. And so that's something, that's a piece of that itself coming from Michael Meade. That is a very wise thing. And you tell that little model to people, especially when they're starting to get older, they're in their 50s, 60s or whatever, the difference between an elder and an older. And they go, I don't want to be an older. I want to be an elder. And and I'm going to have to dedicate to the real stuff because I don't want to be an older, a throwaway player piece. And so what Michael Meade did is he didn't tell you how to become an elder. He didn't tell you what the steps you need to do. He just showed you the difference of an elder and an older. And you saw that and said, oh, wow, I never saw this slippery slope. I never saw how I could be either something functional or something, a planned obsolescence throwaway person. And that was the gift. That was what they paid for to see that lecture, was that he showed them that model. He showed them the difference between an elder and older, and they realized it inside of themselves, and they said, oh, crap. That is a real fork in the road. That's real. And now I need to start working on it. That's the stuff you want to give people.
Yeah, and actually an authentic part of myself and my story is that I've been a long-term patient.
Yes.
So I think that's my approach. It's actually I have to be like, look, if you want to be a good doctor, from my patient experience, let me tell you what could have best helped me and what did best help me that I was missing from the traditional system.
Yeah, now you're doing this, and you could come up with a great deal of information for what to lay on people that you learned from your experience in your life, and how that you have this outsider perspective about the medical system and how that it needs to be reformed, or we need to start looking at it in these new ways. But you just have to realize that you're coming from the outside and then you're going on to the inside, and you're telling these people that they really should start to not prejudice these outsiders and not prejudice outside points of view, and start to look at things from outside points of view. And the system pressures you to discard all outside points of view. So I'm not saying that it's not, I'm saying this is the kind of stuff that's valuable to these young people for sure. But I don't see how, except for, I don't see how it can be widely just sucked in because, Big Pharma doesn't want you saying these things. and other parts of the medical system, they don't want you saying these things. They don't want people to realize that cancer is to a great degree caused by psychological distress.
Well,
They
Gabor Mate's already talking about
He's
it.
an outsider. He's not being invited
But
into
he
by the
is
hospitals and
now.
stuff.
He is.
He's always on the outside.
Yeah, but it's getting in there.
It's
really
definitely
see
getting in there.
it's-
Definitely.
It
So-
is getting in
Right.
there.
So he's 75 years old. He's been working on this for his entire life.
Yes.
He's got it down to a package that he can really perfectly.
Right.
It's not a lot of A, B, C, 1, 2, 3 steps. It's a lot of just wisdom.
Yeah.
Right. And he's delivering that to anyone that will listen. And it's a lot of people who are coming from the medical system, but are now trying
And
to
that-
develop outside of it.
That population
Yeah.
is
That
an
pop-
important population.
That's the population
to
you're
hit
talking
with
to.
this work. Yeah, but there is like Melissa, you were saying, there is a large group of traditional physicians that are now stepping out and awakening. Like
Yeah.
there's a
Yeah, I'm
large
starting to see it.
They're
now.
gonna have now. They have their own little hero's journey that they have to go through, or that they have gone through. And if they're not suffering themselves and they're just providers, well, then most people, the
Because
real
I do
good stuff
look at
comes
all
to people
this. I
through.
look at that
personal.
community online. I
Yeah, you do. Okay.
And I do see it coming out more mainstream.
All I would worry about then is I would be less concerned about what the audience wants, and less concerned about how to plug into the system, and less concerned with all that kind of stuff, and more concerned with what is my essential message, because the message that you have is small. Everybody's essential message is a small message that can be said in 1 or 2 or 3 sentences.
Right,
And that essential message, you have to now discover, it doesn't even really matter if your essential message is mostly a synthesis of other outsiders and mixed with your own stuff and all of that. But that essential message, then you need to crystallize that essential message into something, into some kind of a way of speaking about it. And you can just have a podcast and just constantly speak the essential message on the podcast and run it off this guy or this gal and just kind of speak it out and develop the essential message that way. Or you can put it out on little Facebook memes and just put it out there, or make a website or a
think you
book.
are on
But
track.
you just got to
And
develop the
what-
essential message.
Getting back again, but I think the essence is what you told Scott earlier.
Yeah.
Synthesize it down to simplicity. You know what your audience is, and then you just put it out there.
See
you
where it
start
fits.
talking about it. You write it down. You watch yourself. You watch the feelings that are coming up when you're doing this, right?
Right.
That's very important
Yep.
because you're going to get pushback and stuff. So you got to keep that awareness.
What if I had a band? What if I had found all these great musicians and I'm like, man, you're such a good bass player, this drummer, everybody, wow, you guys are all so good and everything. And I was the producer of the whole thing, but I didn't have any songs. And all these guys were, played in a lot of different bands. They could do a lot of different stuff. And we just started powwowing about, how we're probably, somebody knows Sharon Osbourne, we can maybe get on this label, and maybe we can do this, maybe we can do, we're all powwowing about all the business, and we got the name recognition, we got everything together, but we started putting together the songs, and they kind of just sound like somebody else's songs. And then we're like, oh, okay, well, you know what, that actually can work, and if your thing is to just get on stages and play and make money and just be seen, well then, yeah, you can actually do that or something. But if your intention is to be an artiste and be truly authentic, you're coming at it from the wrong place altogether. The real way to come together would be to write those authentic songs on a frickin' acoustic guitar or whatever it is, and then write the whole album and come up with the whole concept and everything, and then see who wants to join your band. Start
right.
with the message first.
Yep. Yep, I totally agree with that. And I just want to end on this because this is something that I took a lot of notes. Talking about this fear of death concept that comes up a lot. I feel like the majority of people, maybe including myself, it actually to me feels like a fear of unfulfilled potential or destiny. That is the greatest. It's not really death. It's like this fear of I didn't do what I came here to do.
That's
part
healthy.
of it.
That's normal.
That's normal, but the actual fear of death is there true.
That's normal also.
That's normal, that's biological, and it's we don't want to be nothing, right? We don't know what happens when we die.
Right.
And so being nothing is kind of similar to what you just said, right?
Don't we get this practice all the time when we do this work and have these ego deaths? It's like I have viscerally so many times. I'm like, this is definitely it this time.
Yeah, I know.
Like, this was the big one. And then that's happened multiple times, but I have to go through that phase of like, okay, this really is the big one. I'm going to physically die here. And that nothingness, and then realizing, it feels to me like it's a practice for the real thing.
Look at Edward Edinger's psychic life cycle.
Yeah.
You should look at that because it is you and we wish that we could mature away from being grandiose. And so there's the Greek myth of Icarus and him and his father, and they build wings of wax and they put them on the back of Icarus, and he flies off, jumps off the cliff, and he's flying for a while and everything's so great. And then he just flies so high that he gets so close to the sun that the wax starts to melt and he crashes into the sea and dies. And that's a metaphor for the psychic life cycle. And so basically the ego, the conscious mind, until it gets to the point of working out through so many crashes, the ego energy, until it gets worked out enough to where it's balanced enough to where it can just tie in with the heart energy, it can tie in with the capital S self, and it can be a functional position, but not trying to be its own pilot. Until you can get to that point, it's doing this grandiosity cycle. And so it starts with either naivety, right? And you're just going along in the world. And then you start to unknowingly start to identify with your highest purpose, with yourself, with the greater self. You start to identify with the God within, and you're like, oh my God, I never realized that. Or, oh wow, somebody just invited me to take on this job or whatever. Oh crap, I could probably do this. And you start to get grand, and things start to happen, and you start to realize, oh my goodness, this is great, and I'm getting on this ride, and the ride is taking you, and you're like, oh wow, I'm getting higher, I just got promoted, or I just met so-and-so, and it starts happening, and you're like, start feeling really good about yourself. And maybe you start, if it goes on long enough, you start to think, well, everybody starts to tell you how great you are, and then you're like, well, maybe I am really that great. And then you totally identified with the God image within. You now believe, you may not say this, but there's a part of you that believes that there's a part of me that's divine, and I am living a divine purpose right now, and I am here to save the world, and I have something very special. And you get very full of yourself and grandiose. Yeah. And then you fly for a while, and you deliver some stuff to the world, and you get really high, and then after an amount of time, and you don't know how long it's going to be, you start to slip up a little bit, and things stop working out, and people stop calling you back, and you try to reinvent yourself, and maybe you slip and fall, and you get embarrassed in public, and then you try to bring yourself back up, and you want to hold on to your greatness. But after a while, it's the point of diminishing returns, and then you start sliding, and oh, maybe I'll do this, or maybe I'll go work for so-and-so, and maybe I'll try, and you're just trying to stay afloat, and you just start tumbling down, and then you start drinking, and then blah, 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 and you crash. And you crash and burn, and now you're at the bottom, and now all your shadow crap is flooding into your ego, and all of your self-deprecating thoughts and all of your neurotic stuff and all your everything, and how piece of shit I am and how hurt I am and blah, now starts to take you over. And some people just commit suicide right there. And then other people get physically hurt, they lose an organ or whatever, and then they're handicapped or whatever. All kinds of stuff can happen down there at the bottom. But then what happens is you take the opportunity to start to analyze, well, maybe I started to fall because maybe I thought I was greater than I was, and maybe I didn't see what I should have seen over here. I didn't see the signs. I just didn't see the signs. And now you start to become more humble, and you start to go, okay, I wasn't really that great. It was just a ride. And then you have to kind of figure out, what is it that I had was worth doing and what is it was not. And then you have to reformulate yourself and go back out into the world with baby steps after being hurt, and try to go back out into the world renewed, in some way retaining some gold of that experience while throwing away the rest. And the next time you try this cycle, you'll be a little bit more careful and you won't be as grandiose, but you will do it again.
Yeah.
And the
This
grandiosity will get you again. And then it'll keep getting you, and you'll keep doing the crash over and over again until you finally got the point that it isn't about all that grandiosity. It's about the work. It's about the genius, about the seed.
You know,
It's about polishing the mirror.
It's about polishing the mirror.
That, first of all, that was a great explanation.
That's the psychic life cycle.
Very clear, very articulate. It was great. And one thing I was realizing about how we get so caught up on our purpose is one of those things that I can see, like the forward and back within myself, is that actually, yes, I do feel like I have purpose, but at the end of the day, my life is the purpose. My purpose isn't the purpose.
Right.
It's my life is the purpose. So I see so many times that we try to mitigate these dysfunctions by saying, we were talking about like work and purpose. And if people don't have purpose, they do suffer, right?
Yes.
But also, we also do things like, well, we have to have classes on work-life balance. And it's like, wait a minute, that doesn't even make sense. Like, if we have to hold classes and teach on work-life balance and normalize a work-life balance, is because there's something that's out of alignment. So we keep trying to.
Oh, it's just such bullshit from the system. Work-life balance, and then, but the people who are successful are working 80 hours a week, and then they're coming back and saying, you really need work-life balance.
Yeah. So it's that schism of like, we're glorifying these Band-Aids, and actually like we don't need a course on work-life balance. We don't need a course on empathy, because when you've done the work, you're naturally empathetic. So it's like but then people think they found gold when they find these Band-Aids that keep people attached to the matrix and the system.
Yeah.
It's like, no, actually, this isn't the answer. And I think, Melissa, what you were saying is they're burning themselves out now. And COVID has been I have a friend who calls it the COVID temple. Like, there's been a gift within COVID as well, is that they're realizing that they tried to do and create all of these systems and programs to solve their problems, and nothing's working.
Right.
Nothing's working. They can't diagnose their own problem anymore. They don't have the fix. They don't have the medication for what they need. It doesn't exist within the system.
The whole system's in its psychic life cycle. The whole system is like the part of the psychic life cycle where you start to crash and burn, and then you start to scramble to try to figure out what you could do to get back to where you were. That's where our civilization is right now. They're trying to scramble, and it's not working. And they're trying this, and that's not working, and trying this, and that's not working, or maybe this, and they've run out of options. And so now they're just coming up with complete and total fantasies, and they're cheating like mad to just try to scramble.
And so I feel like they're glorifying the shadow, saying that the shadow is the answer. And I'm like, no,
they're identifying with the shadow, actually, and this is just pure Satanism, where they basically said, where they don't even, the shadow has become, this is where you see the person that's walking on the street that's taken over by a demon, basically. This is where a complex that has not been attended to has grown so big it's interjected its tentacle into the ego so much that it's running the person now.
It's
So
a parasite, right?
that it's a parasite, and so
Yes.
that's what these different complexes, the military industrial complex, of the pharma complex, of the big tech complex, of these different giant corporate government complexes, they're all plugged into our tax system and into the insurance system, and they're all in there, and they're just totally doing their own thing, and they're just sucking the host, the society, dry. And it's a necrotrophic parasite. It will kill itself when it kills us. And so we have to basically get out of that.
Well, that was the
And-
whole purpose of this subject that we were talking
This is
about.
the whole, and we know people. We know people who are developing physical problems of different kinds, and they are people in my family are still running to the medical system for their chemotherapy or for their various different medications and stuff that they're taking, and that didn't work. They never worked. I mean, what's the?
I suggest that there's a lot of energy here, and
Yep.
what I would say to complete this talk
Yep.
is that you do have a seed. You've been given an opportunity, and that you should just keep, do what he was saying, create the jewel.
Right. What is the jewel? So what is the simplified jewel of knowledge of gnosis is the word.
Of what it is that
I got
you're
it.
doing,
I got it.
and then
Put that into a package that's simplistic,
and start talking about
and then see who will take it, rather than
Yes.
trying to form it into something that these guys will take. Figure out what's actually needed. It's a difference between the person who's developing their own potion, their own this, that, and the other on their own because this is their genius, and then the person who is trying to satisfy a contract they have with a corporation that says, we want something with coconut in it, and you need to develop that. There's two kind of artists, actually. My brother told me about this. There's two kind of artists. There's the kind of artist that does their own thing, perfects their own art, and then invites the world into their world. This is Pink Floyd. This is our thing. We made this awesome thing. Now come to our concert and experience Pink Floyd. You're not going to get this anywhere else. This is our thing. We're bringing you into it. Then there's the kind of artist that works for an ad agency, works for a corporation, works for a company, and they use their artistic skills to make somebody else's product or whatever look better. Two kinds of artists. The most authentic one is the first.
The conscious artist.
Well, you could still be a conscious person and you could be, very, very working on yourself and all that kind of stuff, but your job is to design logos for auto manufacturers, right? And you're basically, how about this, guys? What do you think about this one? What do you think about this one? They're deciding. And then there's the musician, there's the author, whoever it is, that's doing their own thing, and they're putting out their own thing based totally on their own self creation. And then they're offering that and saying, here's the book I created, here's the album I created, here's the doctrine, the thing I put together. Here it is, world, whoever wants it, take it. Yeah. That's the side I'm on. That's the most authentic side. And I can't really speak to the artist that wants to use their skills to please other people. I don't identify that way.
I know, but there's nothing wrong with
No,
it.
there's nothing wrong with it. It's a legitimate use of your talents, definitely. But it's kind of like
as long as you're not contradicting your.
Yeah, as long as you're not contradicting
Your
your own
art
personal values.
Your own moral structure. Yeah.
And a lot of artists like that, they do have their own thing going on. They have their own album or book or whatever that they do, and then their day job is to work for making corporate logos or whatever it is, or little ditties or something for corporations, and they do both actually. And as long as they're that corporate, you know, I mean, what harm is it in creating logos for a company? It's great, no problem. But I can't do that. I'm not going to put out a logo that I think sucks, put my name behind it just because the board of directors at Ford Motor Company liked it. Nope. So that's not my job in life.
All right. Does Scott have anything else to say? 'Cause it's been 3.5 hours.
Yeah,
here.
okay. Well,
So much. It was awesome. So spot on, so helpful. The one thing that resonated with me personally to kind of finish our earlier conversation was when you talked about the analogy of the band, putting the band together.
right.
And I realized that is what I'm doing. I've written the songs and I'm looking for quality bandmates,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
guys, you know,
Me too.
practitioners who can deliver the very simple system I've devised for people to do on their own, but they're going to do it so much better. And a lot of them are not going to be able to do it on their own.
Yeah.
And I want the practitioners to be the right people. So I'm looking for the all-star band. And that helped me reflect on maybe that is one of the hesitations I have. And indeed it was. So that was very helpful.
Oh,
But
great.
also, Scott, you're not ready to look for a band if you just have riffs. They actually have to be songs.
They have to be songs. And you know, to be fair, they're not fully complete, but I'm at
That's
that.
okay if they're more or less put together.
Yeah.
Right. Those guys will finish it up.
Yeah, I'm at that phase where I know, and this is what's so scary for me, because I know that years long phase of deep study, looking at other things, you know, comparing information is coming to a close. That was my purpose, because it was a purpose that needed to happen in order for me to get to this place where now I am teaching it, transmitting it to the world.
Yes. Right.
And so during the last several years, I have lived, you know, writing down ideas on a napkin at the restaurant.
Yes.
All of those things. I mean, I have napkins, scraps of paper, all of it. And it's led to the development of something that's an almost finished song. Enough to know that this phase is coming to a close. I have to confront the next phase. It's going to be, you know, like you said, it's going to be a book probably, and some web pages. I've already got some good web pages, but needs to be more. And it's got to be a system that people, the other thing is that they, like you said, that they have to be songs, you know, the band's ready to go. And when they're ready to go, I have to have the songs there for them to play. So those are the things I'm trying to, so I'm going through that transition where I know that phase has come to a close and a new era is coming. I'm going to be a trainer of trainers, a teacher of teachers.
Exactly. That's where we're at too, and that's kind of what our thing is that we're teachers and trainer of teachers. But check this out. So I thought a year and a half ago I started writing a new book because we had both intuited it's time to write a second book, and I worked on it for a year. I worked on it for a whole year, and I had a thesis behind the book. And I basically wrote the book a couple of times. And it never really got to be that long. It would have been about, in printed form, it would have been about maybe 75, 80 pages. So that would have been a short book, but it would have been a book. And I had a whole thesis, and I was trying to put the thesis together and to make it something coherent and not just my own little thing that, oh, I figured out how to put these ideas together. I wanted it to actually be a coherent complex that actually was like, oh, cool. I never realized this. You know, I wanted it to be novel. And I stopped working on it 6 months ago. I wasn't coming out. It could not be created at the time. Today, I just posted it on Facebook, a 10-minute slideshow of images with me narrating for 10 minutes. It's called Two Paths for the Red-Pilled Initiate, which basically is everything that I thought, everything that was that whole book was about, was crystallized into a 10-minute narrative. And that's all it was. And when I was finally able to put it together, I wrote it in one day, touched it up the next day, and then did the audio track for it the next day, and then spent 2 days putting the slideshow together. The whole thing was done in 5 days. And it all came out of a year and a half of this whole thing gestating, and my ego thinking that this was going to be my new book. And it did not become my new book. It became a video that's now on YouTube with 12 views.
So far.
So far. But that is the kind of ego death that you sometimes have to go through, where something that's so genius and brilliant and all that has to be worked out, it has to be crystallized, but you don't know really what its purpose is supposed to be. And for all I know, all that really had to happen was I had to do all that work so that my thesis itself could be worked out. And whether or not my thesis was correct or not, I had to go through all this process of self-analyzing whether or not I was even right. And I wouldn't have put out that thing if I didn't think that it was at least partially right. And that's what it took for me to just reach a conclusion. It's like 2 + 2 = 4. I had to do all that work just to reach a simple conclusion. But that is an important conclusion that is a little tiny piece of the greater sort of system that I'm always working on. And so you don't know how much effort it's going to take. You don't know how much acceptance we'll have, but you just know that your inner state is telling you, you must work this thing out. And then you just do it, and you follow you follow God's promptings, and you just do it. And then you let it go into the world and do your best to put it out there, and then you just let it ride, and then you just keep on going. And that's just what we have to do. We have to be very, we have to do these things with humility, and we have to work on our grandiosity.
Right.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
All
Stephanie.
right. See you in a couple weeks.
See you in a couple weeks, and stay in touch on any ideas. We'd be happy to help you out.
Great. Bye,
Thank
Scott.
you. Thanks so
Okay.
much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Scott.
Great
See you soon.
conversation.